Command. If the Lord of the 10 Terra legions were to split their votes evenly, the situation would remain deadlocked. Therefore, in the vote for this audacious plan, the Grand Master had a vote, making a total of 11 votes to decide the legion's next course of action. The Space Marines, like precise war machines, acted with lightning speed once a decision was made. 7 votes were in favor of the plan, 7 lords of the legion were willing to execute the Grand Master's aggressive strategy. The First Legion had been dormant for a long time, and the Legion's high command sought to inspire their confused Legion brothers with a grand victory. Without the Grand Master's decisive vote, the Lords of the Legion had made their choice. 3 dissenting votes represented the last vestiges of reason within the First Legion, but alas, they could not stem the Legion's fervor. Excellent. Urian's stern, taut face broke into a slight smile for his Legion brothers. We shall be united. He turned to the 3 dissenters, his gaze like a piercing blade. The minority obeys the majority. The plan will be executed, and there will be no more dissenting voices. This was a warning. The 3 lords of the Legion had to obey the Legion's actions unconditionally. We will obey your plan. They knelt before the Grand Master, their deep voices expressing submission. Urian nodded with satisfaction. Under the catalyst of external threats, a temporary alliance was forged within the Legion. When the fleet set its sights on Rangdan, external pressure forced the various Terra legions to set aside their past grievances. United in appearance, harmonious in spirit, the Legion's glory would surely be reforged. As for the Rangdan threat, the First Legion was invincible. How will you gain command of the army? The Lord of the 5th Legion asked Urian. He wanted to know how the Grand Master intended to mobilize an army that belonged to a Primarch. This was the key to the plan. Without a massive mortal force, everything was mere talk. Disguise an alien vessel and intrude into the rendezvous point. Urian lowered his voice, explaining to his brothers in a deep tone. Once there's a risk of intelligence leaks, the Legion will have temporary command to proactively attack the aliens. You're mad, the Lord of the 5th Legion looked horrified. You're willing to fabricate military intelligence to provoke a battle and cleanse the Legion's disgrace. Using a false temporary situation to coerce all forces into launching a preemptive attack on the aliens. Do you know the consequences of doing this? He couldn't believe the Grand Master was so crazy. Once discovered, your actions will escalate to affect the entire Legion. It will exhaust the mortals, trust in the Space Marines and utterly shatter the Legion's honor. The Emperor will not forgive us, and the Gene Father will not approve of us doing this. The other lords of the Legion looked at each other, and a ripple of panic stirred within the hearts of the resolute and courageous Space Marines. The Grand Master's scheme was bordering on madness, and his actions were even more so. He was staking everything, the Legion's glory, the Astartes warriors' credibility, and even his own future. Those who had initially approved the plan now had flickering hesitation in their eyes, opening their mouths to try and stop the deepening madness. That's if it's discovered. Urian retorted loudly, his voice echoing in the dim room, overpowering the dissenting voices. We will do it cleanly, leaving no trace. The Grand Master raised his hand and clenched his fist, his gauntlet and knuckles cracking. He stood before the table, looking at each person. This is a rendezvous point near the battlefield. Accidents can happen at any time. Through a small measure, the Legion gains a legitimate reason to take command of the army. Think about it, brothers. Urian's words were highly inflammatory, stirring the lords of the Legion's craving for victory. The First Legion will lead a grand army, charging into the worlds occupied by the aliens and wiping them clean. The accompanying scribes will remember the Legion's decisiveness, its sharp counterattack against the aliens. The lords of the Legion imagined such a scene in their minds, their breathing becoming rapid, as if they saw victory within reach. Agreed. After a debate, most of the Legion's high command ultimately agreed to the Grand Master's plan. Just as he said, if they did it cleanly, no one would notice. We will go prepare and get the Legion ready for battle. The dissenters left, they were outnumbered and could not reverse the established facts. The dissenters silently withdrew. Though they disdained the plan, they still prepared for the coming battle. I will keep a memorandum, the Lord of the 5th Legion said, looking deeply at the Grand Master before leaving, to give an account to the Gene Father in the future. You may. Urian nodded impassively, agreeing. But I hope you keep it a secret. I will not reveal a single detail of what just transpired. With that, the Lord of the Legion turned and left. The secret meeting concluded, and the First Legion began to execute the plan. Within the First Legion's fleet, a ship's records were completely deleted. It was as if it had never appeared in the order of battle. At the Grand Master's instruction, the ship underwent intensive secret modifications, then quietly left the fleet and headed into the void. It would play the role of an intruder, breaking the silence of the rendezvous point. On the bridge of the First Legion Gloriana-class battleship, the indomitable Truth, Urian stood at the viewport, gazing at the starry sky, constantly calculating the time in his mind. Woo! A piercing alarm sounded within the ship, and the alarm arrays of the Forge world shattered the clouds. An alien battleship emerged from the warp into real space. Unknown vessel entering the star system. Ship silhouette matches. Rangdan, vessel. The battleship's cogitator arrays issued an alert, a mechanical voice echoing throughout the entire fleet. It's here. Urian Bendigray took a deep breath, his heart trembling involuntarily. A highly disguised battleship, masquerading as an alien vessel, was the beginning of the Legion's seizure of command. Destroy the vessel immediately. Don't let them escape. Urian's tense roar echoed through the communication channel as the Grand Master ordered an attack. His anxious voice was just right, with a hint of panic mixed in. He felt a slight pang of guilt. The lives of all the mortal crew on the disguised battleship had been sacrificed. The communication channel of that ship was locked, unable to send any signals. Abomination Exemplar is engaging. The report came again through communications. Another Gloriana-class battleship had launched an attack first. All the warships at the rendezvous point started their engines, moving to encircle the intruding alien vessel. Everyone knew that the intruding alien battleship in the Shana star system had to be destroyed to prevent its escape. Connect to the Adeptus Mechanicus Archmagos. Urian's expression was solemn as he sat on the command throne. A holographic image brightened, revealing the mechanical body of the red-robed Archmagos, who held a gear axe. Grand Master Urian. The Archmagos had extensive integrated modifications. His entire lower jaw had been removed and replaced with an external vocal array. His voice was cold, revealing the unique chill of machinery. I am aware of your intentions. Based on my calculations, the Imperial Army's assembly may have already been compromised. One of the Archmagos' bionic eyes projected an image, cold mathematical logic flickering. The current situation is extremely critical. Yes. Urian went with the flow, following the Archmagos' words. Archmagos, we must launch an attack and seize the initiative. It will be a long time until the Primarch arrives. We cannot keep waiting and allow the aliens to prepare for war. The fleet must take the offensive and deliver a swift strike against the aliens. The Archmagos did not answer immediately. He lowered his head, a green data stream flowing through his eyes. The data supports your conclusion. After a long pause, the Archmagos raised his head, the data stream surging in his eyes, and looked at Urian's face. A preemptive strike is the best option. According to the battlefield emergency regulations, Urian Bendigray, you now have command of the army. At this moment, the cold mechanical voice sounded like heavenly music to Urian's ears. He nodded heavily, his fingers twitching, his heart filled with excitement as he took on immense authority. Now, the vast fleet obeyed him, the Adeptus Mechanicus forces, the mortal auxiliary army, and the Titan Legion submitted to his will. Thank you for your support, Archmagos. Urian saluted the Archmagos. I will lead the fleet to the Morse solar system and destroy the alien outpost. Fair winds. The Archmagos nodded, then closed the holographic image. Urian took a deep breath, his inner turmoil raging. He looked out at the starry sky beyond the viewport. The disguised battleship was blasted into fragments, its exploding sparks like fireworks celebrating the plan's success. After a brief moment of excitement, Urian opened a secret communication channel and whispered, completely destroy the disguised battleship. Leave no trace. Understood. On the other end of the channel, a cold voice replied, devoid of any emotion. For the smooth execution of the plan, Urian was cold and ruthless, sacrificing tens of thousands of mortal crew members. Looking at the exploding battleship, as if he could hear the wails of the mortals, the Grand Master silently suppressed his pity. All sacrifices will eventually be rewarded. A flurry of rapid orders was issued, and the First Legion displayed remarkable efficiency, showcasing its combat prowess. However, amidst the intense and urgent commands, astute individuals sensed something was amiss. It was as if it had been premeditated. The First Legion's swift response made it seem as though they had been prepared all along. The Xenos vessel appeared too abruptly, entering the star system precisely within the First Legion's firing range. Furthermore, there was only one vessel, as if it had deliberately intruded into the assembly point. The firepower projected by the First Legion was even more abnormal. enough to atomize that warship, as if they were destroying evidence and concealing a secret within. All these unusual circumstances left the urgently mobilized troops enveloped in a cloud of suspicion. Despite everything being out of the ordinary and hinting at something unsavory, no one dared to question it. Mortal officers led their legions onto the ships, following the Astartes to conquer worlds and destroy the unclean Xenos. Adeptus Mechanicus members cooperated, their Skitarii boarding ships, and Titan god machines walked into Titan transport vessels. The Imperium's population numbered in the trillions, and the soldiers who joined the mortal auxiliary army were all elites, handpicked from countless worlds. The mortals who served as high-ranking officers were even more exceptional, 1 in a million individuals. The Adeptus Mechanicus was no exception. Every Archmagos held the positions of Forge Master, Grand Strategist, and High Official. They may have long sensed the various irregularities, yet chose to remain silent, observing the unfolding events. No one raised questions or dared to obstruct the current operation. The existence of the phrase, "what if," suppressed any rising doubts. What if the Xenos truly intruded into the assembly point, discovered the vast Imperial forces gathered, and sent intelligence back to their homeworld? If the Imperial army did nothing, it would be a dereliction of duty to the Emperor. Moreover, the First Legion's proactive stance struck a chord with the leaders of many factions. After an incident occurs, someone always has to take responsibility, and it was certainly excellent that the Astartes were willing to bear it. An old Terra proverb states, "When the sky falls, the tall ones will hold it up." The First Legion was that tall one, and the Space Marine Legion's actions complied with the emergency war regulations. The vast army, swept along by the First Legion, embarked on the campaign to eradicate the Rangdan. Send an astropathic message to the Primarch, everything we have done complies with Imperial law. Urian had drawn everyone into the vortex with his audacious plan, but the deepest unease still lurked within him. The Emperor's son from Terra, the Primarch of the 21st Legion. Actions on the front line must be reported to the highest commander of the army, explaining the legality of the operation. The astropathic choir received the command, and in the ship's dedicated chamber, they sang around a main speaker, transmitting Urian's order. Having completed all this, Urian breathed a sigh of relief. He sat on the command throne, his eyes glinting with cold light, pouring his full attention into the operational planning. To unite the Legion, he had deceived everyone, even daring to offend the Primarch. The First Legion must achieve victory, no matter the cost. Assuming failure. Urian dared not even imagine the cost of failure. How to face a Primarch. How to face those who sacrificed for his insane plan. Soon, under the First Legion's coordination, all units boarded their warships, and the vessels departed the port, preparing to enter the warp. The vast fleet set off towards the Morse solar system, heading directly for the Xenos outpost. The astropathic communication, sent by the astropaths, traveled rapidly through the warp, finally reaching the astropathic chamber of the Royal Majesty. Upon receiving the message, the astropaths quickly deciphered it, interpreting the true meaning of the metaphors. Astropathic communication differed greatly from conventional communication, its messages were not conveyed directly. Its meaning was quite complex, usually consisting of various metaphors and allegories, or poems and images. The deciphered result greatly astonished the astropath, who dared not delay and presented the content to the Primarch. A Xenos enemy vessel intruded into the Shana star system. To prevent intelligence leaks, the current Grand Master of the First Legion, Urian Bendigre, activated emergency protocols and launched a preemptive attack on the Xenos. Hearing Sophia relay the astropathic report, Blaskowitz's eyebrows rose, his face displeased. Does he take me for a fool? The Primarch's voice was low, not loud, but the anger within it was undeniably real. Whoosh! Everyone on the bridge knelt on one knee, heads bowed, not daring to speak, even the hovering Iron Man lowered its altitude. Rise, Blaskowitz exhaled, immediately realizing his lapse, and raised a hand to signal them to stand. This has nothing to do with you. Grand Master Urian Bendigre. He narrowed his eyes, he had better not mess up this operation. The First Legion. Blaskowitz had long heard of their modus operandi. They were the oldest legion, the first organized legion forged by the Emperor. The legion carried ancient glory, which was their unyielding pride. The conquests of other legions were often against stubborn worlds, with negotiations being the primary method. The First Legion was different, they treated everyone equally, bringing equivalent destruction to human worlds and Xenos alike. They used violence against those willing to surrender, and violence against those unwilling to surrender. Conquest through violence seemed to have become the First Legion's reliance, leaving behind fragmented worlds wherever they went. Fleet, change course, proceed directly to the Morse solar system, Blazkowicz said to the air on the bridge, which was actually an order to navigator Francisca. He had a very bad premonition that the operation against the Rangdan would suffer heavy losses due to the First Legion's recklessness. Reselect the course, proceed to the Morse solar system, Francisca's soft voice sounded, and a new course was planned on the holographic display. Fleet, stay close to the flagship, advance to the new destination, Sophia dispersed the fleet commands via quantum communication. Sophia, Blazkowicz called his loyal servant, looking directly at her blue projection. 3 days before the ships approach the destination, have all combat units prepare. Blazkowicz had to be prepared to clean up the mess left by the First Legion. Understood. Sophia bowed, adding her master's command to the memo. Having given all instructions, Blazkowicz left the bridge and headed to the training deck to guide the Doomslayers. After 6 years in the normal time stream, the destroyer legion's numbers had reached 400. Argent Noor originally had 150, and later 200 more were sent, and after training, they were assigned to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fleets. The 50 newly adapted from Terra were personally guided by Blazkowicz, brought to the front lines to fill high-end combat roles. At this moment, on the Royal Majesty's training deck, golden light shimmered. 1,000 custodian guards, without the tension of Terra, chatted leisurely on the training ground, completely relaxed. Leaving Terra was, for the golden armored warriors, akin to a relaxing holiday. In their leisure time, they came to the training deck to watch the Primarch instruct the Doomslayers. Blazkowicz stood still, no longer approaching the training ground, and without turning, asked Ra behind him, Ra, do you have anything to say? On the bridge, upon learning of the First Legion's actions, Ra's psychic link had transmitted a surge of emotional fluctuation. Blazkowicz did not believe it was a coincidence, the Doomslayer's emotions were very stable. At that time, you had not yet returned, and the Legion was just taking shape. As one of the original Doomslayers, Ra naturally knew what had happened then. His voice was clear, bright with enthusiasm, as he slowly explained to his Gene father. The eldest son once had some conflicts with Hector Saren, the then Grand Master of the First Legion. What exactly happened, we do not know, both of them deliberately avoided discussing that conflict. Blazkowicz pondered, looking at the shimmering golden light, and murmured his eldest son's name. Did such a thing happen? Blazkowicz had scoured the Legion records and remembered clearly that there was no mention of it. Yes. Ra nodded, his posture as straight as a pillar. It was not a deliberate concealment from you, but due to the special nature of the incident, it was not recorded in the Legion archives. Do I need to send an astropathic message to inquire of Lord Blazkowicz? Sophia's figure appeared, bowing as she asked her master. No need, Blazkowicz shook his head, refusing, there's no need to bother him, I will know when the time is right. Understood. Sophia slowly retreated, then vanished into light particles. Blazkowicz had some inklings in his heart. The conflict at that time was very likely one of the triggers for this unexpected event. Hector Saren was already dead. He died in a battle with Xenos. The War Council combat records showed that the First Legion suffered heavy casualties in that battle. The Grand Master's successor, perhaps for some reason, wanted to prove something to himself through battle. Blazkowicz strode forward, walking towards the training ground. All secrets would be revealed once they reached the front lines. There was much to do now. Organize the army, prepare for war, and get ready to face the most brutal battles. The massive fleet broke through the warp barrier and returned to the real universe. The glow of the fleet's engines was as numerous as the stars, and from Morse world, it seemed as if 1,000 stars had suddenly appeared in space. They came to the Morse solar system, bearing humanity's wrath, to deliver destruction to the hateful Xenos. The fleet's auger arrays were fully activated, and a massive amount of data poured in through them, displayed in real time on the bridge of the indomitable truth. The Morse solar system was rich, it had a star, a habitable world, and several mineral-rich worlds. But it was also not peaceful. The Xenos had utilized the star system's natural resources to build it into a fortress star system. The orbits of every world were densely packed with defense platforms, and the void was filled with fire traps. This was merely the surface, the density of hidden defensive emplacements was even greater. Fleet, spread out and form battle formation, Urian immediately ordered, instructing the fleet to first disperse and enter standard combat procedures. The fleet assembled here was the Imperium's battle-hardened army. With just a simple command, the captains knew what to do. The vast fleet spread out, increasing the distance between ships, and formed a battle formation in the void. Grand Master, a communication is coming in. The communications officer turned and looked at the Grand Master, awaiting his command. Patch it through, Urian nodded, standing ramrod straight. A holographic projection lit up, and the image displayed caused the Grand Master's expression to change, his eyes burning with fury. Traitor. He gritted his teeth, cursing the person in the holographic image. You abandon human dignity to serve as a Xeno's lackey. Indeed, a human appeared in the holographic image, dressed in simple rags. Through the intelligence from the 5th Legion, it was known that the Rangdan Xenos possessed psychic control methods. When truly facing humans, the Grand Master could not hide his inner rage. In the holographic image, the gaunt human's face was ferocious as he warned the Grand Master, "Human, get out of here." Then his expression changed again, adopting a docile and respectful look. "This place belongs to my lord." The Grand Master sternly rebuked, setting the tone for the war. "Tell your master that we come bearing destruction, vowing to utterly annihilate them." A war of extermination. The man suddenly knelt, his face incredibly devout, praising the Xenos' greatness. "My lord has conquered hundreds of human worlds. You will be the same, subservient to their great will." Hopeless. The Grand Master shook his head, raising his chin, looking disdainfully at the human who had become a Xeno's lackey. "Tell them to clean their necks and await humanity's slaughter." With that, without giving any chance for rebuttal, the Grand Master gestured to cut the communication. The enslaved human's angry curses of rebuttal had just left his mouth when the communication was severed. "Order the fleet to attack without restraint." Knowing the situation, Urian felt a sense of relief. Humans who become Xeno servants can only be purified of their defilement through destruction. Humans controlled by Xenos are no longer our kin, they have no free will and have become loyal lackeys of the Xenos. The Grand Master suppressed his rage, his eyes narrowed slightly, but his taut nerves suddenly relaxed. In a war without scruples, the First Legion had countless means to defeat the Xenos. Understood. The Lord of the Legion responded, leading their respective fleets to attack the Xeno creations in the void. The Imperium of Man's battleships aggressively surged into the void, clearing the Xeno contamination within the star system. With 3 Gloriana-class battleships as the core, the fleet split into 3 main forces and a dozen smaller fleets, attacking simultaneously from various directions. Constantly cruising the void, the Imperium's elite fleet displayed formidable strength. They did not have the precise calculations of the Argent Noor fleet, their battle-hardened instincts alone were enough to overwhelm the enemy. As the human battleships advanced, they engaged the first wave of Xeno defense platforms. The Rangdan Xenos' technology was also powerful. Energy weapons like lance weapons had the same output as the Imperial side. This was an evenly matched battle, there was no technological disparity. The defense platforms, relying on their size, had even stronger firepower and shields. A few volleys could overload a battleship's void shield. But the Imperial fleet was not foolish enough to stand still and exchange fire with the defense platforms. Each battleship formation communicated frequently internally, utilizing the ship's flexibility to rotate resistance against the defense platforms' firepower. The two sides battled in the void, beginning a long-range artillery duel. Lance weapons and macro cannons roared in unison. Augers locked onto targets, divination arrays calculated variables, and the timing of weapon launches was just right. Blazing lance weapons streaked across the void, and ship thralls worked in unison, loading massive macro cannon shells into the acceleration chambers. Plasma and lance weapons flew, and macro cannon shells, accelerated to 1/10 the speed of light, bombarded the defense platform shields. The fleet fully deployed, engaging their marked enemies, and the situation looked excellent. The Abomination Exemplar, the Indomitable Truth, and the Truth Razor, like 3 sharp blades, pierced into the core of the star system. The Indomitable Truth was even more aggressive, aiming directly for the Xenos, lair in the Morse solar system, Morse world. Urian's vigilance gradually relaxed. The Xenos were indeed dangerous, but the Imperium's main fleet held an absolute advantage. Just as the Grand Master lowered his guard and prepared to plan a landing operation, an anomaly appeared in the communication channel. Grand Master. Xeno battleships have appeared behind us. An urgent voice came through. The mortal captain's report was hurried and fearful, as if he had seen something terrifying. While Urian disdained mortal courage, he immediately looked at the holographic image, and what he saw made him, an Astartes created by the Emperor, gasp. It was a gigantic battleship with a terrifying appearance, filled with ugliness and disgust. Only then did Grand Master Urian suddenly realize that the information provided by the 5th Legion might just be the tip of the Rangdan iceberg. The battleships that the 5th Legion landed were human servant battleships, similar in style to the Imperium. The true Xeno battleships now appeared in the void. They were extremely blasphemous and terrifying creations. Perhaps the battleships seen now were the true Rangdan Xenos. A long, strip-shaped battleship stretched across the void, its 10-kilometer gray-brown hull like a decaying giant whale, with fluorescent green pus oozing from the gaps in its scales. In the gaps where the scaled armor opened and closed, there were worm-like structures that seemed to breathe. The upper deck was slightly more normal, covered with what humans recognized as armor. The lower part of the ship was nauseating, deviating from normal human aesthetics. Just one glance increased disgust. Large amounts of biological hull tissue, connective tissue wrapped around wriggling energy conduits, like diseased, pale human intestines dotted with moldy spots, with long fibrous material trailing at the bottom. Dense biological conduits wriggled as the battleship activated, flowing with fluorescent green energy streams. The battleship's upper structure was even more disgusting. It was a structure resembling a pulsating giant brain, covered with dense red vascular tissue. On both sides of the battleship, there were densely packed, anise-like wrinkled circular holes, which the Grand Master deduced were some kind of gun ports. The ugly Xeno battleship had a bone-like ram covered in scales at its bow. The Grand Master frowned, forgiving the mortal captain's panic. The Xeno battleship's exterior was covered in biological organs, yet its engines were cast from steel, and plasma afterburners tore through the void. Biological technology on the outside, mechanical technology is the skeleton. The hateful-looking battleship displayed a fusion of different sciences. The fusion tech battleship and the purely mechanical defense platforms were completely different in style. What exactly happened? The Grand Master asked the Augur Array supervisor. Xeno battleships could not appear out of thin air. They not only appeared behind the fleet, but on the Augur, more and more Xeno battleship reactions appeared, with signals from 20 Xeno battleships in the star system. The crew immediately reported, unraveling the mystery of the Xeno battleship's stealth. Sir, the Xeno battleships use some kind of camouflage technology to conceal their signals. The Augurs cannot detect them. Attack them. The Grand Master immediately ordered a preliminary wave attack to test the Xeno battleship's firepower. The fleet immediately turned, detaching enough battleships to confront the Xenos, strange battleships. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Soon, the Imperial battleships engaged the Xeno battleships, both sides firing at each other from long range. Blue high-energy clusters shot out from the anise-like wrinkled holes. It was some kind of bioplasma cannon. The brain tissue organs vibrated rapidly, emitting flashes of lightning that struck the battleship's void shields. The void shields flickered rapidly, overloading in an extremely short time, and lightning whips struck the Imperial battleships. The battleships hit by lightning began to have unstable engines, and their ship lights gradually extinguished. Electromagnetic weapon attack. It will drain our battleships' energy, making us completely defenseless. Static crackled through the communication channel, and the first batch of battleships engaging the Rangdan Xenos sent back urgent alarms. Battleships without shields were like lambs to the slaughter. The Rangdan battleships seized the opportunity, using their shields to withstand the Imperial battleship attacks, focusing fire on the defenseless ships. A shower of sparks erupted in the void. In the void battle with the Xenos, the human side was the first to pay the price. Although the Imperium's fleet held a decisive numerical advantage, its overconfidence and aggressive advance led to the first combat losses. The Rangdan warships, organized into formations of 5, overloaded the void shields of the Imperial vessels with their initial electromagnetic bombardment. Their second volley of biological plasma cannons instantly destroyed a destroyer. They were well disciplined, clearly organized, and their crew's quality was on par with the Imperium's. Humans, slaves, kneel before us. The Xenos transmitted foul messages on the common channel, wantonly insulting humanity. Xeno mongrels. Feel the wrath of humanity. The Grand Master of the Abomination Exemplar, filled with rage, rebuked the Xenos on the common channel. The mighty Gloriana-class battleship bravely advanced, and at optimal range, its auger array locked onto the Xeno warships. With all her broadside weapon arrays blazing, the Abomination Exemplar unleashed her fury. Macro cannons roared. Lance beams tore through the void. The scorching energy and the brilliance of the macro cannons illuminated the universe. With just one volley, the terrifying firepower of the Gloriana class instantly overloaded the Xeno warship's shields. The violent bombardment caused layers of the semi-organic warships, scales to peel off, biological tissue to instantly vaporize, and scorching energy liquid to splatter into the cold void. The Xeno warships died like living organisms, their wreckage silently disintegrating in the vacuum. As the main fleet entered the engagement zone, their firepower compensated for the technological disparity, and victory gradually shifted towards the Imperium. 20 Xeno warships, after destroying a few small vessels of the Imperium of Man, were repelled by the capital ships, leaving behind more than 10 warship corpses. In the ensuing slaughter, they fled in disarray but managed to slip past the Imperial fleet's blockade. In astronomical unit-scale combat, an unknown camouflage technology completely evaded visual and electronic tracking. Continue the attack. The Grand Master continued to order the fleet to eliminate the defensive platforms and eradicate the void threat. He selected all the landing warships and dispatched them towards Morse world, preparing for a planetary assault. Urian's strategy was sound: eliminate the Xenovoid strongpoints to completely free up the fleet's combat space. The planetary assault would clear out the Xeno ground forces, causing the Rangdan to completely lose Morse world and their foothold for further expansion. Conversely, humanity could use this as a staging point to continue their offensive into the Rangdan heartland. The Morse solar system had become a strategic key point. The First Legion had to take it. On Morse world, augur scans reported relatively few planetary defense systems. Originally a human industrial world, it was now occupied by the Rangdan, who had exploited its resources, turning it into a chaotic mess. Urian nodded. The sparse planetary defenses likely indicated that the Xenos overly relied on void defenses and had built few ground fortifications. Commence the planetary assault. I will fight alongside you. The Grand Master's communication was relayed to the landing fleet. He put on his helmet and headed to the landing craft. Outside the planetary defense system, the landing fleet adjusted its posture, aiming the bellies of the warships at Morse. Then, 50,000 Space Marines of the First Legion, with 10,000 on orbital standby, and the rest committed to ground combat. Urian intended to use a crushing lightning war to quickly annihilate the Xenos entrenched on the planet. All 10 heavenly armies were deployed, establishing 3 landing points, and a million-strong mortal auxiliary army poured out. Drop pods away. Urian gave his final order before leaving the bridge. From high orbit, the ship's belly channels opened, and the first wave of Vanguard warriors departed in drop pods. At 3 locations, 3,000 drop pods lightly penetrated the planetary shield, plummeting towards the planet's surface. The Rangdan Xenos on the ground, aside from activating the planetary shield, showed no signs of counterattack, as if they had resigned themselves to their fate. Such abnormal behavior aroused some people's vigilance, but it quickly faded. 40,000 Astartes, used to conquer a single planet, meant no Xeno could stop them. As the drop pods landed, the warriors of the First Legion stepped onto the planet's surface. In the distance, a hive city stood on the plains. Then, they saw the hive city gates wide open, and enslaved humans pouring out of it. Ragged, emaciated humans, uniformed workers and middle class, and richly dressed elites were all mixed together. Without exception, all humans had been subjected to mental control by the Xenos. They held crude auto weapons, with patches covering vital areas of their bodies, serving as simple defensive armor. The people rushing out of the hive city faced the Astartes without fear, only the devotion of fanatical cultists. With their screams and shouts, the charge of millions began. The ground trembled and rumbled under their footsteps. Facing such a scene, only the resolute Astartes, the superhuman warriors, could remain composed. Establish a defensive line. The Legion's company captains quickly gave orders. Their mission was to protect the landing zone. The first sound of a bolter rang out, followed by a cacophony, and the ammunition fired by the brutal weapons wove into an impenetrable curtain of fire. This was a massacre. At the planet's 3 landing points, the same scene unfolded. Fearless human slaves swarmed out of the hive city, charging the Space Marines. The warriors of the First Legion immediately established their positions, using their various weapons to slaughter the frenzied human army. Precise bursts from bolters pierced through multiple enemies with each shot, then exploded within the crowd. Incendiary weapon rays ignited large swaths of organic matter, burning them into piles of charred bones. Heavy weapons, deployed with the drop pods, continuously projected firepower, smashing into the deranged crowds. 1,000 drop pods and 4,000 space marines created an incredibly terrifying curtain of fire. Their coordination was seamless, their reloading rhythm as precise as machinery, and the firepower never ceased. Servoskulls and autoservitors continuously transported ammunition from the drop pods, replenishing the expended supplies. Blood mist erupted within the slave army, and the shattered body fragments and organs from bolter explosions paved their path forward. Every step forward cost tens of thousands of lives. Ordinary human forces, facing such a hellish meat grinder, would have long since crumbled. But these were Rangdan slaves, their minds controlled, living expendables for the Xenos, and humans continued to stream out of the hive city. Enduring the bolter bombardment, as if oblivious to their comrades falling around them, they relentlessly pressed towards the space marine positions. Finally, at the extreme range of their auto weapons, the mortals fired the first shot. Although it had no effect, it carried extraordinary significance. It proved that with sufficient numbers and unified will, mortals could pave a path with their lives to approach the Space Marine defensive line. As the slaves drew closer, the Space Marines no longer needed to aim. Any shot fired would not be wasted ammunition. There were simply too many, so many that merely advancing would eventually allow them to encircle the Legion's defensive line. The slave army gradually surged forward, their auto weapons firing at the black armored warriors, clanging against their power armor. Just as the slaves rejoiced, a shadow fell from the sky. The Legion's large-scale landing craft descended through the atmosphere, arriving at the landing zones. Legion warriors continuously disembarked, immediately joining the battle and pushing back the human slave charge. I have a very bad feeling about this. The Lord of the 5th Legion, always cautious, voiced his concerns as soon as he landed. The Xenos haven't activated their planetary defense weapons, as if they deliberately let us land. I feel it too. Urian, helmeted, nodded gravely. Even the most sluggish commander should have noticed something was wrong, let alone an Astartes. It's possible that everyone on this planet has become a slave. The Lord of the 5th Legion, holding a staff in one hand, pointed into the distance. There was an endless tide of human slaves, old and young, even infants crawling in the throng. From the elderly to toddlers, all surged towards the Space Marines like puppets. To this point, what did the Xenos look like? The 1st Legion knew nothing about them. Capture some mortals. I will set up a psychic array, hoping to gain some clues. The Lord of the 5th Legion said this to the Grand Master, then walked away, calling his psychic subordinates to enter a landing craft and begin setting up the psychic array. Urian nodded, agreeing to his request. Expedite material transport. We are facing the entire population of this world. He then ordered 2 warriors to charge into the enemy lines under the cover of their brothers, to capture several mortals. Inside the landing craft, at the center of the psychic array, several mortal captives were restrained. Even now, their expressions remained fanatical, uttering foul words. The Lord of the 5th Legion ignored them, diligently performing the psychic ritual. He was actively cautious, knowing that the Xenos' mind control abilities meant their psychic power must be extremely strong. To be safe, he mobilized 20 psychic brothers, hoping to succeed in one attempt and glean intelligence on the Xenos. As the incantation was chanted, the psychic energy of 20 Astartes flowed into his body, and his consciousness pierced into the mortals' minds. After a while, the mortals at the center of the array suddenly exploded into a mist of blood. The Lord of the Legion opened his eyes, his face pale, and he mumbled. We are in big trouble. The Lord of the 5th Legion, the soul of a space marine, protected by 20 brothers, entered the mind of a mentally controlled mortal. His soul plunged into the void, with boundless pure black before his eyes. A mortal's soul should not be so empty, it should be vibrant and colorful, filled with the brilliance of emotions. However, this pitch-black consciousness was covered with countless fine white cracks. Looking closely, they were not cracks, but fine lines formed by white consciousness, like a spider web, entrenched in the mortal's consciousness, controlling thought fluctuations. At the convergence point of the white spider web, a white light spot floated, appearing pure and harmless. When the Lord of the Legion's conscious tendrils touched the white light spot, Zeno's knowledge instantly flooded his mind. He had to do this, taking immense risks, to probe the Xenos race's psyche and obtain relevant Xenos intelligence. The moment the outstretched conscious tendril touched the white light spot, Xenos knowledge surged into his mind. He glimpsed the underlying structure, basic intelligence of the Rangdan Xenos, and even some of Morse's military deployments. The Rangdan's war structure consisted of a massive army of controlled slaves at the bottom, elite warriors in the middle, and those at the top called WARHAMMER. The Xenos had long anticipated the arrival of humanity, and Morse was a meticulously set trap. The Lord of the Legion's consciousness sank, he was even more eager to know more. Who is touching my mind? Just as he was about to delve deeper, a strong mental wave arrived. The white spider web cracks suddenly contracted, piercing towards the Lord of the Legion's consciousness, attempting to take over and control him in reverse. Vast mental fluctuations, like an ocean, pressed in from the darkness, and the white spider web transformed into ropes, ensnaring the Lord of the Legion. He was horrified. After years of probing mental worlds, he had never encountered such a powerful psyche. It far surpassed an Astartes, extremely aggressive and domineering. But the Lord of the Legion was not flustered, he was an Astartes, and his consciousness was protected by his brothers. He condensed his consciousness into a sharp spike and thrust it towards the white light spot, aiming to destroy the Xenos' consciousness. A tragic mental fluctuation erupted, the white light spot was pierced through, and then shattered into countless irreparable cracks. Another piece of information entered his mind, and the Lord of the Fifth Legion quickly processed the data. The Rangdan Xenos, with their powerful psychic abilities, could control races with weaker psychic strength. This control was irreversible, a dual control of both mind and body. The Rangdan's brain, being larger due to its prominent psychic abilities, secreted a unique brain fluid to sustain its function. For the Rangdan, this brain fluid was a consumable for cleansing the brain, a physiological substance secreted and excreted daily. But Rangdan brain fluid had another function. If ingested by other races, even in tiny doses, the brain fluid would pollute the mind, establishing a psychic link with the brain fluid's owner, thereby achieving mental control. Human, you will get nothing from me. The Rangdan uttered a venomous curse. The moment their consciousnesses touched, the Xenos knew it was a human spying on them. The white light spot trembled unstably, shattering into glass fragments and disappearing into the dark consciousness space. As the Xenos' psyche departed, the mortal's mental world gradually collapsed, with no way to save it. In the real world, the mortal's body exploded directly, turning into a cloud of blood mist. The Lord of the Fifth Legion, his consciousness returning to his body, involuntarily shivered. We are in big trouble. His voice was low, cold sweat beaded on his forehead, alleviating the aftereffects of his consciousness leaving his body. Help me up, he motioned for his battle brothers to assist him, his tone urgent. Take me to see the Grand Master, this is a trap. Urian stood in the command center, staring intently at the holographic map, his face resolute beneath his helmet, but his brows were furrowed. Everything was normal at the landing zone, personnel and equipment were continuously descending from orbit, and the tactical deployment was proceeding smoothly. In the distance of the front line, the human charge continued, but the charging force had changed. The old, weak, and sick were exhausted, and a meter-thick carpet of flesh and blood had accumulated on the ground. The human servants dispatched by the Xenos, clad in carapaces and armed with standard auto-rifles, advanced and retreated with tactical precision. In the wilderness outside the Hive City, the standard servant army, under the cover of the flesh and blood wall, set up heavy firepower positions, bombarding the landing zone's void shields. Grand Master Urian's planned surprise attack, a swift and decisive victory like autumn leaves swept away, was dragged into a positional war of attrition by the massive numbers of slave cannon fodder. Urian Bendigray. A weak and urgent call came from the command bunker's security door. Urian looked up and saw the Lord of the Fifth Legion being supported by two battle brothers. The Grand Master quickly went to meet him. He realized the seriousness of the situation, for a Lord of the Legion to drop his respect and call him by his name. With one hand on his brother's chest plate, Urian turned, lifting his arm and placing it on his own shoulder. Why are you so weak? Urian helped him to an armchair, his tone full of concern. A small side effect of the psychic power. The Lord of the Legion shook his head, taking off his gauntlet to reveal his large hand. Take off your helmet, I don't have time to explain, I will directly transmit memories. Normally, Urian would never allow psychic power to enter his mind, to prevent potential memory alteration. But at this moment, he felt his brother's urgency, an emergency that could not be delayed. Urian removed his ceramite helmet and bowed his head to his brother, the trust between them self-evident. The Lord of the Fifth Legion raised his arm, psychic light flickering at his fingertips, and pressed his thumb to the Grand Master's temple. With a 0-degree chill, Urian felt a segment of information enter his consciousness. Psychic light emanated from his eyes as he saw the memories the Lord of the Legion had touched. This was a trap. The Rangdan had set a snare here to test the Imperium's strength. The Rangdan's warmaster and elite warriors were hiding in the human hive city, using human servants to deplete the Imperium's fighting strength. Only when the First Legion was exhausted would they appear, to harvest the Imperium's living forces. Urian staggered backward, supported by his guards, now knowing everything. The Grand Master's mind was a chaos, momentarily lost in thought. He knew that this operation had failed. Under his leadership, the First Legion had charged into the Rangdan's trap, putting the fleet's billions of lives in danger. How did the Xenos know that the Imperium of Man would come here and prepare in advance? Tell the fleet to be wary of Xenos' surprise attacks. Urian shook his head vigorously to clear his mind, breaking free from his guard's support. The Grand Master did not delve deeper. Now was not the time to investigate intelligence leaks. What needed to be solved immediately was how to arrange the next tactical moves to resist the Rangdan's assault. Notify the orbital fleet. He shouted, his face pale and anxious. Tell them to deploy war materials as quickly as possible. Urian's order was decisive. The Grand Master would not withdraw his troops, but instead, would more actively pursue the landing operation. Urian Bendigray. The Lord of the Fifth Legion stood up, pointing at the Grand Master and sharply rebuking him. This is a trap, don't you understand? We should retreat now, preserve our fighting strength, and wait for the Primarch to arrive. This battle, we have already lost, we must evacuate from here. Don't let your pride destroy the First Legion. The Lord of the Legion's final words were like a plea, urging the Grand Master to leave. For the Legion. Inside the command center, the black-armored warriors standing in solemn attention glanced at the pleading voice. They had never seen a vulnerable Lord of the Legion. I know. Urian's eyes were tearful. He took 2 steps forward and held his brother's shoulder plate. I know everything, my dear brother. Precisely because of this, I must have the fleet deploy more supplies to sustain a prolonged battle. His voice was low, choked with emotion. Things are irreversible, can we still leave? The Xenos meticulously prepared this trap, and we, my arrogance led you all into it. They want to wear us down, and we, too, must delay, waiting for the Primarch to arrive. 4 months, we must hold on, preserve the Imperium's military strength, and have the capability to counterattack. The Lord of the Legion opened his mouth. He could not refute the Grand Master's tactical arrangements. Now, all million mortal troops had landed, and the fleet was truly executing the next phase, with the Ecclesiarchy and Titan Legion about to touch down. With so many personnel and armaments, it was easy to descend but difficult to ascend. Deploy all supplies, the fleet prepare to evade, and send a astropathic message to the Primarch. Urian quickly made arrangements, demonstrating the decisiveness of a Legion leader in dealing with the unfolding situation. Brothers of the other legions, obey my command, and gather at these 2 locations. He marked 2 locations on the map, instructing the warriors at the other 2 landing zones to move there. This way, all landed forces would form a triangular opposition, mutually supporting each other from fortified positions. The Lord of the Fifth Legion remained silent, pondering the Grand Master's words, and nodded in approval at the deployments he had made. Purely in terms of decision-making, what the Grand Master was doing now indeed aligned with the predictions for the battle. The locations marked on the map were 2 high grounds, overlooking the current landing points. Once the troops from the 2 landing points arrived and occupied them, they would become strategic strongholds, sufficient to hold out until the Primarch arrived. The Grand Master's orders were issued swiftly, and all combat supplies from the warships were descended from high orbit. The Legion's warriors, despite some doubts about the original landing point, chose to respect the Grand Master's command. The lords of the heavenly host ordered their troops to take their supplies, fight and retreat, moving towards the Grand Master's location. On the indomitable truth, the Astropath choir chanted spells, sending messages to the Primarch in the warp. Just then, the choir members convulsed, blood spilling from their mouths and noses, greatly alarming the guarding Legion warriors, who quickly pushed the Astropath away, interrupting the astropathic communication. Warp. Gigantic object. Approaching. Distortion. The Astropath convulsed in the Legion warrior's arms, his spastic muscles making it difficult to speak complete words. The Legion warrior decisively took a dose of medicine from his backpack and accurately injected it into the Astropath's carotid artery. The Astropath's life or death was irrelevant, but the intelligence he possessed had to be revealed. 3 seconds later, the medicine used by the Space Marine brought the Astropath back to normal. He knew he wouldn't live long and immediately recounted what he had seen. In the warp, 3 gigantic objects are approaching, distorting astropathic communication. We cannot send signals now. I understand, came the Grand Master's reply over the communication channel. The Legion's highest commander understood the gravity of the situation. The astropath's body convulsed again, the Space Marine's medicine was causing his mortal body to collapse. Crack, the Legion warrior twisted his neck, ending the astropath's suffering. On the ground, perhaps due to the Lord of the Legion's probing, the Slave Legion, carrying heavy firepower, attacked the First Legion's position. Brothers, hold the line. The company commander on the front lines coordinated the defense, his steady voice motivating his brothers. Before them was a bloody mist, a mountain of corpses, and an endless tide of humans. The pungent smell of blood seemed omnipresent, seeping into the Space Marines' respirators. The current battlefield was a clash between humans, with Space Marines slaughtering mortals. Mortals, they are not our compatriots. They are pawns mind-controlled by Xenos. Destroying them is helping our compatriots find release. Compared to the Space Marines' composure, the will of the mortal auxiliary army was constantly being ravaged by the horrific sight before them. The warriors of the First Legion, holding bolt pistols in one hand, hissed through their respirators, boosting the mortals' fighting spirit. Mortal military judges and military police, whips in hand, patrolled back and forth behind the lines to prevent the auxiliary army from suffering mental breakdowns. In the auxiliary army's ranks, laser guns flashed continuously, killing their own kind surging towards them. They suffered minor casualties, the enemy's autoguns and laser weapons were deadly to mortals. Mortals were, after all, not demigods and did not possess sturdy ceramide power armor. Fortunately, under the protection of the void shields, the enemy's long-range firepower was blocked. The Adeptus Mechanicus was constructing defensive positions, using various tools for digging and building, creating trenches for the auxiliary army. Various automated defensive weapons were set up inside the lines in the most scientific arrangement, defending against low-velocity shells entering the void shields. Red-robed Scutari were arrayed in groups, scattered across the front line. They were well equipped, supplementing the auxiliary army's insufficient firepower. Titans continuously descended from space, standing in the front line, occasionally firing energy weapons to supplement firepower. Compared to kinetic weapons, energy weapons did not require ammunition and only needed maintenance by Adeptus Mechanicus personnel. Urian did not dare to deploy the Titans easily. The Grand Master understood that the First Legion and the landing forces needed to stabilize the front line and fight a prolonged war of attrition. The Imperial side was expending will and ammunition, while the Rangdan Xenos were expending humans. How many people were in a hive city? The smallest had at least hundreds of millions of people, the larger ones had tens of billions, and some superlarge hive cities even reached hundreds of billions of people. Morse was an industrial world, with 4 hive cities towering over its factories. After the initial resistance against the Xenos and the later Rangdans' wanton expenditure of the population, it was estimated that the Rangdan still had 1 billion people they could control. This was data, estimated by the Adeptus Mechanicus based on the size of the hive cities and the scale of the factories, and submitted to the Grand Master. 1 billion. This number was like a mountain, weighing on Urian's heart. Not 1 billion humans who would feel fear, but 1 billion fearless puppets. Mech Sage, I need an Adeptus Mechanicus warship to be scuttled into our front line. Urian negotiated with the Adeptus Mechanicus in space over the communication channel. He needed an Adeptus Mechanicus warship to land within the front line, providing fire support while also serving as a wartime factory. Grand Master, is it really necessary? The Mech Sage was silent for a long time. This sage, having more human organs, furrowed his brow and asked the Grand Master. According to my calculations, while the number of human puppets is large, they do not pose a high threat. Are you being overly cautious? The enemy is not just these. Urian shook his head. Xeno reinforcements will arrive soon, and I must quickly establish the front line to resist the arriving Xenos. As he said, Urian realized the seriousness of the problem and had to use every means available. If you insist, the sage saw the Grand Master's serious expression and, after some thought, agreed to the request. A cruiser will descend. I hope your prediction is correct, Grand Master, and that you make good use of the omniscious creation. Thank you for your generosity. A flicker of gratitude flashed in Urian's eyes. Regarding the need for a warship to descend, the First Legion had many warships that could serve this role. What Urian wanted was a factory, a manufacturing plant that could continuously produce weapons and ammunition, providing for the front line's ammunition consumption. Only an Adeptus Mechanicus warship with an integrated factory could fulfill this role. Both sides quickly coordinated, and a warship equipped with a manufacturing factory and filled with various supplies descended from orbit. The warship's descent provoked a furious counterattack from the Rangdan Xenos, and the orbital defense weapons instantly opened fire. The cruiser's void shields activated, and it rapidly descended, trying to minimize its altitude to avoid multidirectional strikes. Seeing the Xenos counterattack, Urian smiled coldly. The more nervous the enemy, the more it meant he had done the right thing. The 5-kilometer-long Adeptus Mechanicus cruiser was hit several times by orbital defense fire, and its void shields rapidly overloaded. Fortunately, before the second orbital weapon volley, its altitude had dropped below the firing angle. Under the precise control of the Adeptus Mechanicus personnel, it slowly landed within the Legion's lines. If all went as expected, it would remain here forever, never again to navigate the void. Urian immediately set about building a defensive system centered around the cruiser, his inner worries significantly lessened. This warship was his greatest assurance. Within the atmosphere, macrocannons could not be used, the strong shockwaves would sweep away the entire Legion. Lances and other energy weapons, however, could be used at low power, otherwise they would instantly vaporize surrounding troops. The low-power weapons or secondary cannons of a void warship were equally not to be underestimated, they far exceeded the greatest ground firepower. Come on. Urian spoke on all channels, roaring in a low, deep voice, let the Xenos come. We are ready to resist their attack. He had made the utmost preparations, building an impregnable defense within a day. Did the Xenos want to stall? To break through the Legion's defenses using vast numbers of mentally enslaved beings? The First Legion, with its dispositions made, was now unafraid of delays. All of Urian's deployments had pushed his talents to their limit, making the most correct choices. As the star set, the battle entered the night. The Rangdan slave army advanced by digging trenches through the piled blood and mud, pressing the Legion's lines at all costs. Their Xeno masters cared nothing for casualties, hiding under the protection of the Hive City's void shields, thrilled by the internecine conflict of their human kin. The battle intensified, lasting for 3 full Terran days. The Imperial legions rotated countless times for rest, yet never ceased fighting. The mortals' trigger fingers trembled. The Space Marines, however, did not feel tired. They required very little rest. A few minutes of napping was enough to restore them to peak condition. Urian never rested, monitoring the battle from the command center. His heart was constantly taut. If the Xenos were only like this, holding out until the Primarch arrived would be no problem. But reality always delivered a harsh slap in an unexpected way. The most feared thing had finally arrived. Grand Master, there are gigantic objects approaching in the warp. The alarm over the communication was urgent, the voice trembling with fear. Vile humans, surrender to fear, and bow before the might of our race. You shall witness the creation that will crush your meager courage, the battle moon. The Xenos' triumphant taunts echoed across the common channel. Grand Master Urian shook his head with a bitter smile, his inner hopeful fantasy never coming true. The massive object that had blocked the astropathic communication, after 3 days of warp travel, finally arrived in the Morse solar system. The Rangdan Xenos reinforcements had arrived, and they were swift and powerful. Their war technology, in some aspects, rivaled or even surpassed that of the Imperium. The 5th Legion's assessment was correct. The Rangdan were indeed an existential enemy of the Imperium, an opponent against whom humanity must fight with all its might. As Urian was lamenting, within the Morse solar system, the warp index continuously rose. 3 colossal warp exits, arranged in a triangular formation, suddenly and uniformly appeared within the star system. The fleet noticed the anomaly, with astronomical telescopes tightly locked onto the warp portals, and auger arrays at full power, scanning for any unusual signs. On the ground, Urian saw the anomaly in the holographic projection. He walked out of the command post and looked up at the sky. The monitor in his helmet quickly zoomed in, displaying the captured images. Within the visible star system, a spherical behemoth slowly emerged from the warp, squeezing into the real universe. It was even larger than Terra's moon, Luna, and with an overwhelming sense of oppression, it entered the real universe. The Xenos, colossal space structures had arrived in the real universe. The appearance of 3 battle moons, and the gravitational disturbances caused by their immense mass, made the planetary orbits tremble slightly. The stars trembled, and so did human hearts. 1 battle moon appeared in orbit around the planet, its steel construction exerting an oppressive force that further terrified the mortal soldiers. Humans would fear power far beyond their imagination. Over the course of a week, the already battered morale of the mortal soldiers was now on the verge of collapse. Snap! The sonic boom of a whip dispelled fear, and the long whip wielded by the military police was even more intimidating than the Xenos construct hanging overhead. The auxiliary army lowered their heads, rekindling their inner courage, and opened fire on the human cannon fodder pressing forward. Brother, Urian called out on the comms channel. He had to make arrangements. Grand Master, please give your orders. The Lord of the Void Sky Army interjected into the communication, his expression solemn, knowing the gravity of the situation. Urian said to the Lord of the Void Sky Army, I grant you authority to command the entire fleet. Preserve your strength and engage the Xenos in a war of attrition. You are the most skilled in Void Fleet combat, I will not interfere much. My battlefield is on the ground. I understand. The image of the Lord of the Void Sky Army faded, as he took over command of the fleet and directed it to withdraw. Urian let out a long breath, secretly relieved that he had landed one warship on the surface. The Legion now relied on the warship, forming a defensive triangle on 3 high grounds. It was impossible for the Xenos to conquer the First Legion. The First Legion would hold out until the Primarch arrived. No matter the cost, the First Legion would never abandon its position, it would hold to the death. Brothers. In 4 months, a Primarch will arrive to sweep away the filthy Xenos and their servants. There were no inspiring words, Urian was not good at them, and the First Legion did not need inspiration. They were the strongest legion, now trapped by the Xenos. The Grand Master was confident they could fight their way out with all their might, but the cost would be incredibly high. They had to preserve their strength so that when the Primarch arrived, there would be enough force to counterattack the Xenos. Hold your ground, await reinforcements. Finally, Urian put on his helmet and went to the front lines to boost the morale of the mortals. Seeing the brutal scenes on the battlefield, the bullet marks on his brother's armor, and the perseverance of the mortal soldiers, a sense of guilt welled up within him. The First Legion, skilled in extermination and annihilation warfare, was now forced into passive defense due to a combination of various reasons. The Imperial forces had also paid a heavy price for their arrogance. But this was necessary now, there was no turning back. When the war ended, Urian was willing to accept any punishment. Whether the punishment came from Imperial authorities or the Primarch, he would accept it all. The fleet, led by the Lord of the Void Sky Army, departed. The upcoming battles would primarily consist of guerrilla harassment, with the main fleet hiding in the void to preserve its strength. Various gigantic hatches on the battle moons opened, and void fleets emerged from within. Each battle moon carried hundreds of semi-organic warships, filling the void around it. The vast Morse solar system now appeared crowded. The Xenos' naval power far exceeded that of the Imperium by several times. Seeing the Imperial fleet's departure, the Rangdan fleet did not pursue. The Xenos knew that with humans present on Morse, human reinforcements would surely come. This was their initial strategic objective, with no deviation. Waiting for the rabbit by the stump, besieging the point to strike at reinforcements. The human servants provided tactics that were indeed very effective. Insignificant human, lay down your weapons and surrender, become a servant of our race. The Rangdan Xenos hacked into Imperial communications and found Urian. It adopted an arrogant posture, satisfying its emotions by humiliating the existence of humans. Urian said nothing. He had finally seen the Xenos, the true Rangdan race. The Xenos' exterior was covered in grayish rocky scaled skin, with 6 thick legs on its lower body, all joints pointing outwards, allowing it to run in any direction. The first time Urian saw the Rangdan before him, he immediately determined that the opponent was wearing bio-armor, and its true body should be small. Its waist was a rotating platform, and the design of the bio-armor's lower half left no room for the Rangdan's actual body. The upper half of the bio-armor had 2 multi-jointed main arms, as well as multiple sliding tentacles. Its head was rounded, surrounded by a ring of monitors, providing a full 360-degree view. Most striking was a fleshy rod on its head, about a foot long, pink-like tender flesh, resembling some kind of antenna. The bio-armor had no facial features, but above its torso was a terrifying face. Its eyes were wide open, its nose a skull, its mouth filled with sharp teeth, and a long, ugly tongue licked at one of its fangs. The face was extremely intimidating, an ordinary person seeing it on the battlefield would be scared out of their wits. Grand Master Urian memorized the Xenos' features. After a brief analysis, he realized that the Rangdan's true body should be relatively fragile. HMPH. He snorted, extending an ironclad boot. Filthy creature, you're not even worthy of licking my boot. You're nowhere to be seen on the front lines, hiding behind slaves. Have you come out to die now? For someone skilled in verbal attacks, the Grand Master's words were generally effective. But the Rangdan was enraged, its bio-armor trembled, and white smoke billowed from its seams. It was worshipped by slaves, revered as a true god. When had it ever heard such humiliating words? I am Rangdan Warmaster, Lolos. I will personally train you to be the most obedient dog, licking 10,000 boots every day. Come then. The Legion is right here, Urian said with disdain. I just fear you lack the courage to face humans, hiding behind your slave army. Just you wait. Lolo's tone was hostile, and he immediately cut the communication. Communications between Xenos and humans were mostly like this, never friendly exchanges. Prepare to counter the Xenos. Attack, they are very powerful. Let's probe them first. Urian curled his lips into a cold smile. He deliberately provoked the Xenos, making them personally engage in combat, which would facilitate the acquisition of critical intelligence. In planetary orbit, the Xenos warships adjusted their stance, their broadsides aimed at Morse, and from their anal folds, circular bio-eggs were launched. The Xenos drop pods penetrated the atmosphere, avoiding human anti-aircraft fire, and landed in front of the hive city. The ovate bio-eggs shattered, their fluids spilling onto the ground, and from them emerged tall Rangdan elite warriors. They were massive, clad in grayish rocky bio-armor, as tall as space marines. They held a biogun in one main hand and a curved bone-bladed warscythe in the other. Multiple biotentacles flailed, their tips reflecting cold light, serving as sharp small blades. 1,000 Rangdan warriors descended from the sky. The enslaved humans were frantic and excited, as if gods had descended among them. Gakakaka. The grotesque face on the bioarmor's abdomen, with its built-in sound emitter, roared, its piercing sonic waves intimidating the human slaves. From the hive city behind, a large number of Xenos technological constructs advanced towards the human lines. Artillery fire struck them, causing ripples to appear on their surfaces, indicating some form of directional defense system. The appearance of elite warriors and war machines signaled the war's entry into its second phase. The most brutal close-quarters combat was about to begin. Wah! The human servants let out strange cries, running to keep up with the war machines, charging towards the human positions. Tracks sank deep into flesh, mercilessly crushing the bodies of the auxiliary army, churning up mangled remains and organs. The auxiliary army continuously fired, red laser dots striking human traitors, low-energy projectiles successfully penetrated shields, killing a large number of enemies. When the distance was close enough, the Space Marines ceased firing and picked up their close combat gear. Filthy Xenos. Receive the wrath of the Astartes. Someone roared, and the Legion warriors, armed with various equipment, charged out of their lines. They had to go out to block the charge for the mortals and create stable firepower output. The vehicles of the heavenly host of iron aimed, driving tanks and other battlefield vehicles to provide strong fire support for their brothers. Power weapons lit up, and force fields deflected attacks. The warriors of the First Legion clashed with the Xenos. 0 comments 0 vote. Titan. A tiny surge of fear, a fear of the Rangdan, suddenly erupted in the veteran's mind. He immediately understood that the approaching alien entity possessed psychic contamination. A muffled groan sounded, and another Legion warrior fell. There were also strong individuals among the Rangdan, several blades pierced vital points, taking the life of a death angel. From the Rangdan's circular mouthpart, a pinkish, thorny spike emerged, covered in viscous fluid, identical to the one on the biological armor's head. The alien was pleased, thinking that by merely inserting its mouthpart into a warrior's body, it could control the powerful warrior to fight for it. However, its golden eyes saw an armored hand, its 5 fingers spread, reaching out towards it. I am a warrior of the Emperor. The veteran's voice was low as he grabbed the alien entity, his thumb gouging out its eyeball. Weakness and fear, the faint instincts are suppressed to the extreme. He squeezed his fingers, and the Rangdan's tentacles, in agony from the pressure, coiled around the cold armor. Splat! The Rangdan alien entity was crushed and burst by brute force. Beware of the alien's death throes. The aliens want to control my mind. They possess psychic contamination, luring out inner weakness and fear. The veteran, dutifully, transmitted the information again to prevent his Legion brothers from being ambushed. The Legion soldiers, having received the intelligence, launched a fierce attack, killing the Rangdan elite warriors. It wasn't that the Rangdan were not strong. If it had been ordinary Space Marines, the battle would certainly have been evenly matched. Facing the First Legion's battle-hardened veterans, the Rangdan were utterly outmatched by experience, suffering massive casualties. In the first wave of attack, the Legion lost 100 Legion warriors, while killing 500 Rangdan elite warriors. Ah! Piercing screams came from the Imperial front line. The mortal auxiliary army's eyes widened, dropping their weapons and clutching their heads, tearing at their hair. The psychic contamination emitted by the Rangdan entity completely shattered the already battered minds of the mortals. One after another, like a chain reaction, large numbers of mortals showed terror, screaming and abandoning the front line. The crack of the military police's whips echoed, but it could not stop the auxiliary army's collapse. With a bang, a Space Marine's bolter fired, killing the collapsing mortals. Even some strong-willed mortal soldiers turned their lasguns on their frenzied comrades, killing them without hesitation. There was no other way. All wise, clear-minded individuals knew the horror of the alien psychic contamination. They had learned it the hard way. The mad human compatriots charging the front line, fearless of death, were the best lesson. In 10 seconds, the Imperial front line was restabilized, and the destabilizing elements were cleared. With the death of the Rangdan elite warriors, the alien war machine immediately retreated, moving away from the human front line. As for the charging humans, they were mere consumables. How could they compare to the noble warriors and the expensive value of war machines? The humans at the front line were quickly cleared, and the Imperial side immediately reorganized, preparing for the next wave of battle. Inside the command fortress, Urian silently nodded as he saw the battle damage at the front line. The casualty ratio between Legion warriors and Rangdan elite warriors reached 1:5, which was within an acceptable range. As the operation deepened, the Space Marines would understand the Rangdan elite warriors better, and the casualty ratio might widen further. He looked at the messages coming from the other two front lines on the command console, which were also under synchronized attack by the Rangdan. Across the three defensive bases, the aliens had deployed a total of 3,000 elite warriors, causing the First Legion to lose over 500 men. As for the Adeptus Mechanicus Ecclesiarchi Guard, their direct losses were fewer, with most mortal losses coming from mental collapse. Strictly forbidden to consume Rangdan flesh to gain intelligence. Their bodily fluids are the source of psychic control and will contaminate the warriors' minds. Urian ordered a strict prohibition on Legion warriors consuming Rangdan brain tissue to avoid psychic control. The battlefield matters were temporarily settled, and his gaze shifted to his side, where an observation report lay on the steel table. He picked up the intelligence data slate and threw it onto the command console. The data was immediately read, and the information within was displayed as a holographic image. The more Urian read, the grimmer his resolute face became. The data slate contained aggregated information from various units that had been attacked. It came from void ships before losing contact, and from the 3 attacked defensive bases. The intelligence showed that the alien warships seemed to understand Imperial warships very well. Various ship models, specific maneuverability ranges, accurate firing ranges, and weapon loadouts. In the early Void battles, there were even alien ships that mimicked Imperial ship signals, deceiving the Imperial fleet and causing heavy losses. Fortunately, the Void host reacted in time, changing identification signals to prevent further losses. And in ground combat, the Rangdan elite warriors' attacks mostly targeted the Space Marines' vital points. Coupled with the ambush in the Morse solar system, a terrifying truth surfaced: Imperial intelligence had been leaked. The Rangdan's premeditated show of weakness, their initial panic upon first contact, were all deceptions to lull the Empire into a false sense of security. Only after the Imperial forces fell into the trap did the aliens reveal their fangs, striking hard at the Imperial forces. His 2 hearts beat violently. He had never feared aliens or terrifying enemies. But now, the Grand Master of the First Legion, he felt a looming darkness. An enemy within the Empire, a high-ranking official colluding with aliens. If it wasn't uncovered quickly, the losses inflicted on humanity would be immeasurable. Urian issued a warning to everyone in the command room: this matter must not be revealed in the slightest, the implications are too vast. There was no response in the command room. The mortals nodded, choosing silence, and the Space Marines stood silent as statues. Urian put away the data slate. He had to keep it safe and deliver it to someone who could handle it. This level of intelligence leak must have come from high up in the Empire. The only ones who could handle this were the Primarchs, Lord Malkador, and the Emperor. Beep, beep. A red alert screen reappeared on the command console. The Rangdan spaceships had once again dropped deployment pods, launching another attack. Grand Master Urian watched with cold eyes. The aliens had increased their forces tenfold, with 10,000 elite warriors attacking. The other two defensive bases also had elite warriors descending from high orbit, conducting synchronized strikes. He remained silent, beginning the tense deployment work, praying internally. Now, only the Primarch could save the Imperial forces. He hoped he would arrive quickly. The First Legion would fight to the death, holding back the enemy's advance and protecting the intelligence in the data slate. The truth must be told to the Empire. The intelligence must be delivered to the Primarch, so the Empire could be warned early about the internal enemies colluding with aliens to betray humanity. Urian pondered for a moment, then made another deployment. Do not sally forth carelessly. The army must remain under the protection of the Void Shields. Adeptus Mechanicus personnel must constantly monitor to ensure the normal operation of the Void Shields. He had to ensure that the Imperial Legion was protected from orbital strikes. Warships and Continental-class Void Shields merged, forming multi-layered Void Shields to prevent alien orbital strikes. Urian thanked the humans of the Dark Age of technology. For defenders, the Void Shield was the greatest invention. The First Legion's Void Shields, originating from ancient technology, had far greater power than ordinary ones. They protected the Legion from orbital strikes, preventing ultralong-range saturation bombardment. The attackers would have to engage in close-quarters combat to achieve victory. Furthermore, that alien leader, Lolos, wanted to encircle the First Legion and strike at the relief fleet. It certainly wouldn't destroy Morse world. It needed leverage to attract other Imperial legions. All these reasons combined meant that the First Legion would surely hold out until the Primarch arrived. What Urian was worried about now was not the First Legion, but rather the Lord of the 21st Legion coming to their aid. 3 battle moons and hundreds of alien capital ships constituted a very powerful military force. I hope the Void Host's message will be taken seriously by the Primarch. He sighed, turning his attention back to the command console. The Rangdan's attack had already begun. Realizing that Morse was an alien trap, and after astropathic communication was jammed, the Grand Master had several ships depart, heading to human-controlled areas where communication was possible, sending a signal to the Primarch. The First Fleet was rapidly traveling through the warp, and Blaskowitz had, of course, received the warning. The ships that left Morse sent very dense astropathic messages, which most Imperial forces in the Ultima Orientis sector received. The fact that the First Legion was besieged shocked the other legions. How much longer? When will we reach the Morse solar system? Blaskowitz sat on the edge of the training ground, tapping his fingers on the steps. His tone, though very calm, never hid his anxiety. Fewer and fewer messages were coming back from the front line. He found it difficult to clearly know the First Legion's current situation. Blaskowitz, however, was clear that the First Legion would not be annihilated. They were the aliens' bait. The tactic of encircling a point to strike at reinforcements, though old-fashioned, was truly effective. My lord, our warp engines are faster. We will reach the destination in 60 days. Francisca's soft voice sounded, the navigator having calculated the precise time. Upon receiving the precise answer, Blaskowitz's expression visibly relaxed. He nodded and said to the seemingly empty space ahead, very good. Maintain the course and minimize any errors. Francisca's voice held a touch of honor. I am constantly monitoring the warp lanes. We will arrive with the absolute minimal error. Blaskowitz slowly nodded, casually bringing up a holographic projection to review Sophia's readiness. The First Fleet, based on the intelligence received, had formulated multiple tactical measures against the Xenos. The factory warships accompanying the fleet used Argent newer war technology to produce some specialized equipment. Although far from the battlefield, the First Fleet was already prepared for battle. As the data flickered before his eyes, a sharp glint flashed in the depths of Blaskowitz's eyes. If Rangdan intended to use the First Legion as bait, this large fish, himself, would likely drag Rangdan down with him. The fleet advanced rapidly through the warp, heading towards the Morse solar system at a speed far exceeding what the Xenos and Urian had anticipated. Blaskowitz had prepared a grand gift for Rangdan, hoping the Xenos would graciously accept it. On Morse world in the Morse solar system, the non-stop, arduous battle had continued for 55 Terra days. Rangdan's attacks came in waves, constantly probing for weaknesses in the First Legion's defenses, but found no vulnerable points in the human lines. After the initial 3,000 Rangdan elite warriors were repelled by the 1st Legion, the Xeno offensive became slightly sluggish. Having suffered immense casualties, the elite warriors ceased their direct attacks, instead continuously sending forth human thralls to deplete the Empire's ammunition and military supplies. But the Empire's ammunition seemed inexhaustible. Urian's decision was wise. Backed by a Mechanicus warship providing production and supply, the Imperial Legion did not have to worry too much about ammunition. Grand Master, here are the casualty figures for the last 3 hours. The computer presented the data slate to the Grand Master. Thank you. Urian took the data slate and offered his thanks. His voice was somewhat weary, stubble had grown on his chin, and his eye bags were slightly swollen. His fatigue did not stem from his body, but from his highly strained nerves. Responsible for the overall command of the ground war, the Grand Master bore pressure far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. After reviewing the brief, the helplessness in Urian's eyes deepened further. The numbers of the mortal auxiliary army were being rapidly depleted, with less than half of the soldiers remaining combat effective. The mortal troops provided by the Empire to the Primarch were simply too few and could not withstand the attrition against Rangdan's slave armies. In the protracted war of attrition, the Mechanicus, 300,000 elite Skitarii also had only half remaining. Without Rangdan elite warriors participating in the attack, the Space Marine losses were very low, almost non-existent. However, the Empire's high-end combat power still suffered severe damage. During Rangdan's attack with 3,000 men, after several days of fierce fighting, the Legion suffered over 5,000 fatalities, paying a huge price to annihilate them completely. The Legion had 40,000 warriors deployed, divided into 3 defensive bases, creating a significant numerical gap. Grand Master. My psychic language has detected a major crisis. At the entrance of the command fortress, the Lord of the 5 Meng heavenly army strode in, his tone hurried. Outside the range of our auspex, billions of mortal cannon fodder have gathered, surrounding us from all directions. Tens of thousands of Rangdan elite warriors are ready, synchronized with the cannon fodder, preparing to assault our lines. The Lord of the 5 Meng heavenly army's face was covered in fine beads of sweat, his resilient heart shaken by the prophetic vision. The Xenos battle moons will soon descend, trampling our defenses. They want to further weaken our forces. Hearing such urgent military intelligence, Urian's face darkened. He quickly stepped forward to meet the Lord of the Legion and asked anxiously, "In your prophecy, can you see the Primarch's arrival?" He did not doubt the accuracy of the prophecy. His brother of the 5 Meng heavenly army was very accurate in war predictions. No, the Lord of the 5 Meng heavenly army said with a pale face, shaking his head at Urian. Regarding the Primarch's prophecy, there is only endless darkness. Upon hearing this, Urian's tall frame staggered backward, and at once, a myriad of regrets surged into his heart. His heart felt as if it were being gnawed by 1,000 insects, and his mental defenses utterly collapsed. His actions replayed before him like a rapidly spinning lantern, as if vividly real. If it weren't for his stubbornness and arrogance, his Legion brothers would not have died, and the Imperial forces would not be facing total annihilation. The Grand Master's heartbroken appearance suggested he had been completely broken by the crisis of imminent total defeat. 2 guards supported him from behind, preventing the Legion leader from falling. The Lord of the Legion was shaking his head, and the atmosphere in the command center was heavy. The Legion faced a matter of life and death. No, no. Urian's voice suddenly rose. He shrieked violently, shaking his head frantically, and a glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. His frenzied appearance made the Lord of the 5 Meng heavenly army step back, asking cautiously, "What's wrong, Grand Master?" "We are about to achieve victory." Facing an unprecedented crisis, the Grand Master, after a brief collapse, said with full confidence, "Our reinforcements are coming soon." Everyone in the command center looked at the agitated Grand Master, their eyes filled with doubt. Had the Grand Master perhaps succumbed to the pressure and developed mental issues? "I am certain. The Primarch's reinforcements are about to arrive." Urian seemed full of confidence, his weary and dejected face re-energized. He looked at the doubting faces of his brothers and calmly explained to them, "We are the bait, the fish Rangdan is reluctant to let go of in order to catch a bigger fish. Now, the Rangdan Xenos are coming to eliminate us instead." "Why is that?" The Grand Master's sharp eyes swept over his brothers, hoping someone would speak the answer, an inspiring answer. "The big fish has taken the bait." Immortal, he cried out in excitement, stood up, and then immediately knelt down. "Yes, the big fish has taken the bait," Urian said with a smile, walking over to the mortal and helping him up. The Xenos must have warp observation methods and know of the Imperial reinforcements' arrival, so they are eager to eliminate us to prevent us from joining forces with the reinforcements. The Grand Master stated his deduction and viewpoint, and the Space Marines in the command center looked at each other, finally nodding slowly. They also believed that the Grand Master's deduction was very reasonable and highly probable. 5 days. Urian raised his hand, spreading his palm, then hesitated. 7 days at most, and the Primarch will arrive. He calculated a reasonable time based on the distance at which the Xeno battlemoon affected astropathic communication. Go and prepare. Urian ordered, dismissing his Legion brothers. As long as we hold out for 7 days, victory will be ours. As his voice fell, the ground trembled, and holographic projections warned, the Xeno Titan units had landed. Brothers. Imperial soldiers. The Grand Master opened the communication channel, shouting in his most impassioned voice, I have received news. Reinforcements will arrive in 7 days at most. A son of the Emperor, a mighty Primarch, will bring destruction to the abhorrent Xenos. The Grand Master's voice spread through the communication channel, and silence fell everywhere it reached. After a few seconds, a powerful cheer erupted. In the most desperate moment, intense hope also burst forth. The Empire's 3 defensive bases, after extensive repairs, had defensive walls towering around their perimeters. From the highest watchtower, a black line appeared on the horizon. The alert operator aimed his binoculars at the black line, increasing the magnification. After clearly seeing what it was, the mortal alert operator's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a black line at all, it was a dense, endless army of enemies. He pressed the alarm, and the highest level of alert sounded within the defensive base. Urian, in the command center, also felt his scalp tingle, his breathing momentarily pausing. Within the Auspex range of the 3 bases, dense red dots appeared at the edges, surrounding them from all directions. All weapons opened fire. Within the Imperial defensive bases, all accessible weapons opened fire on the enemy army. Dense arrays of various weapons, trailing brilliant plumes of exhaust, plunged into the human sea. Large numbers of humans were vaporized, pulverized into dust, but it was still a drop in the bucket, unable to stem the surging human wave. Rangdan had committed its entire population, aiming to annihilate the human forces in one fell swoop. Line-of-fire combat units, take cover. Macrocannon firing. The Mechanicus warning was urgent, the slowly modified warship macrocannon was about to fire. Thump. Like the heartbeat of a planet, boundless waves of air exploded as the warship macrocannon fired on the planet's surface. The gigantic projectile was visible to the naked eye, slowly, falling into the human sea, erupting into a mushroom cloud. The unstoppable shockwave reverberated back, carrying dust that struck the city walls, sweeping away mortals who were too slow to evade. Just one round of macrocannon fire annihilated 30 million humans, an extraordinary achievement. Praise the Omniscia. Such fury stirred the hearts of the Mechanicus members, their mechanical voices filled with praise. Continue the attack with atomic weapons. Urian notified his Arsenal brothers, activating forbidden weapons to bombard the disoriented mortal slaves. To hold out until the end, the auxiliary army had to be eliminated. At the Grand Master's command, dozens of missiles carrying atomic weapons were fired into the densest enemy formations. Tens of kilometers outside the defensive base, several dazzling fireballs erupted, vaporizing all living creatures within their blast radius. Other missiles landed in enemy formations without exploding, but the skin of people within the affected area gradually festered, muscle tissue peeled away layer by layer, until all cells were killed. Radiation weapons, one of the First Legion's many forbidden weapons, were highly effective for eliminating large, dense biological targets. More nuclear bombs detonated, unleashing the ultimate power of atomic weapons developed over tens of thousands of years. The nuclear bombs, like fires of repentance, vaporized the flesh and sins of the treacherous mortals. Terrifying phosphorus warheads ignited all organic matter, causing the sea of people to boil. These powerful weapons unleashed horrifying effects when targeting unshielded enemies. The light emitted by the weapons made the Legion's warriors turn away and mortals closed their eyes to avoid retinal burn. Only members of the Adeptus Mechanicus knelt, shouting praises, glory to the Omniscia. Just one wave of strikes eliminated 80% of the population, shattering the threat of overwhelming numbers. As the appetizer fell, both humans and Xenos knew that the seemingly terrifying scene was merely the prelude, before the main course began. In front of the First Legion, at the gates of the hive city occupied by the Rangdan, gigantic Xeno-Titans continuously descended. They were protected by shields, turning their towering bodies, watching with interest as the humans eliminated their own kind. The Rangdan's Titan units were no different from the biological armor of their elite warriors, only greatly magnified. The shortest were 15 meters, some were 30 meters, and the tallest reached 50 meters. They were equipped with many more armaments. Numerous bio-cannons adorned their chests and ribs, 2 colossal cannons were mounted on their shoulders, and multiple shield generators were located at their shoulder blades. Their arms wielded bioplasma cannons, and their flying tentacles shimmered with disintegrating lightning. Xeno boarding craft slowly descended, disgorging large numbers of elite warriors, as well as some even larger beings. The images transmitted via holographic display made Urian's pupils contract. The Rangdans, overlords, had appeared. The Rangdans, Warmaster, and Overlord, were high-tier Xeno combat units, far more powerful than their elite warriors. Despicable mortals. The Xeno-Titan's sonic array system activated, emitting a contemptuous voice, as if the Xenos were superior beings. Kneel, accept the brain fluid of our race, and become our slaves, that is your only choice. The Titan unit's sonic array produced truly visible shockwaves, shaking the will of the Imperial forces. Urian recognized Lolo's voice. He connected the communication to the Imperial Titans and responded to the Xeno's arrogance. Xeno-mongrel, it is right for you to lay down your weapons and accept the Imperial purge. The leaders of the two different races had already exchanged tons of insults during the long war. Urian Bendigray. Lolo sneered, after today, you will surely grovel before me and lick my fingers. Urian was not afraid of the Xeno's threat. Instead, he urged his opponent, bring it on. Your time is running out. After all, my reinforcements are arriving soon. How do you know? The voice abruptly stopped, then resumed a few seconds later. Vile human. Lolos realized he had been tricked into revealing his strategic intentions. Urian smiled, his deduction confirmed, and he couldn't help but mock. With your intelligence, the position of Warmaster seems too demanding. I have a floor cleaning job in my room that would suit you perfectly. Lolos gritted his teeth, knowing he couldn't outart Urian, and angrily declared, let's settle this on the battlefield. Warriors. Destroy the human front lines, they have outlived their usefulness. At the Rangdan Warmaster's command, there was no movement on the front line. The Xenos were waiting for the encirclement, waiting for the human slaves to advance in defense, and then to charge simultaneously. As for how many human slaves would be lost in this process, they didn't care in the slightest. Inside the defensive base, artillery fire raged, continuously launching shells to bombard the human forces. Notify the other bases to abandon their front lines and reinforce us, Urian told the communications officer. He abandoned the other two bases, consolidating his forces to fight a decisive battle against the Xenos. Any defense was meaningless now. The Rangdan were consolidating their forces, intending to crush the human defensive line with overwhelming force. As his order was issued, the Rangdan Titans moved, leaving their formation to intercept the reinforcements. God machines, to battle. Just then, the voice of the Adeptus Mechanicus came through the communication channel. The avatars of the Omniscia will destroy the abominable creations of the Xenos. Woo, 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 behind the Imperial defensive perimeter, the Titan's sirens shrieked, as if challenging the Xenos to battle. The Titan Legion, long awaiting orders, strode towards the Xeno-Titans. The avatars of the Machine God, 10 Warlord Titans, marched out of formation, followed by dozens of Reaver Titans and Warhound Titans. Several Imperator Titans slowly followed, trailing at the very rear of the procession. Xeno-mongrels. Face my wrath. The Titan Princeps roared, his mind linked with the Titan, transforming him into the Titan's body. Even though their numbers were far inferior to the enemy, the Imperial Titan Legion chose to engage, upholding the dignity of the Titans. As if by unspoken agreement, the Titan legions of both sides moved to the flanks of the battle line, both deciding on a decisive battle. The Titans opened the battle. Unable to wait for the human servants, the Rangdan elite warriors launched their attack. Human warriors were very powerful, and they absolutely could not be allowed to consolidate their forces and cause more losses. For the Emperor. The roar of the Space Marines echoed along the entire defensive line, carrying supreme resolve. For the Emperor. The mortal auxiliary army rose in resistance, firing their weapons at the Xenos, creating ripples across their shields. Omniscia. The voices of the Adeptus Mechanicus Scutari were calm, yet equally filled with passion. Different factions and humans were now united, forming a single front to resist the Xeno assault. The Rangdan warriors' plasma guns were astonishingly powerful, continuously firing, killing warriors who couldn't dodge in time. A single blue plasma bolt could penetrate a space marine's power armor, and it was a devastating blow to mortals. The Xeno war engines advanced in sync, their shields protecting their warriors, and large lasers continuously fired, suppressing human tanks and heavy firepower. Only now did the Rangdan display their full strength, intending to crush human courage. For a time, various projectiles flew across the Imperial front line, energy beams eliminated each other, bolter rounds thumped, picking off Rangdan warriors. Meanwhile, on the other side, the battle between titans was even more brutal, the clash of colossal machines was world-shattering. Packs of Warhound titans raced on the flanks, covering the larger titans, and tearing into the enemy's smaller titans. Plasma blast guns fired, twin-linked turbolaser destructors roared, using their speed advantage to attack the 15-meter class Xeno titans. Reavers fired all their weapons, Gatling blaster cannons, laser blasters, Reaver melta cannons, causing the enemy shields to tremble violently. Warlord titans equipped with single-handed melee weapons strode forward, their void shields merging to form an even more resilient shield. The Xeno titans' firepower was too strong, their gigantic plasma cannons incredibly powerful. If the titans fought individually, their void shields would immediately overload. The 6 Imperator titans in the rear, each carrying a gigantic earthquake cannon, fired in pairs, destroying Xeno titans in seconds. The powerful earthquake cannons, capable of destroying large titans with a single shot, were specifically designed to combat Xeno colossal constructs. Having never encountered Xeno titans before, and for safety, 2 cannons attacked one at a time, ensuring maximum lethality. Boom! 6 deafening cannon shots rang out. The earthquake cannons were immensely powerful, and the Imperator titans lowered their center of gravity to reduce the impact. Witness the wrath of the titan. Xeno twisted creations, filthy flesh machines. Blazing light struck the Rangdan titans, the first shot overloaded their shields, the second penetrated the Xeno titan. The Rangdan titan wailed, emerald energy fluid, like blood, flowed out, and it slowly knelt before collapsing. Instantly killing 3 Xeno titans was undoubtedly a morale boost, but it also attracted extra attention. More Xeno titans aimed their shoulder-mounted plasma cannons at the Imperator titans, seeking to eliminate this major threat. Boom! A plasma reactor detonated, an Imperial Reaver was pierced, causing a violent explosion. I will tear you apart. A roaring siren was heard. A purely melee warlord titan charged forward, its power claw wreathed in lightning, tearing apart a Xeno titan. Without additional armaments, its steps were heavy, but its movements were the fastest, flexibly dodging and pulling at the enemy's lines. Thump! Muffled thuds continuously echoed. The combined efforts of the Warhounds yielded impressive results, with enemy titans constantly falling. Of course, the price was heavy. Within just a dozen minutes, more than half of the Warhound titans of the Titan Legion had been lost. It was too tragic. Every moment, a god machine fell, locked in an endless struggle with the enemy. Terrifying weapons exchanged fire, energy streams and physical projectiles collided, and each death was profoundly shocking. Then, a warlord titan fell. Several plasma cannons struck simultaneously, its void shield overloaded and disintegrated, and a scorching energy stream melted through its armor, finally detonating its reactor, turning even the machine thrown into scrap metal. As time passed, the Imperial Titans gradually lost their advantage, overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the Xenos. One Titan Legion, facing over 100 Xenos Titans, found it incredibly difficult to sustain the fight. The Titan battlefield was like a hell, where steel behemoths and flesh and blood monsters tore entangled, oil and corrosive bodily fluids raining down. Meanwhile, on the Imperial front, Urian personally led the charge, resisting the attacks of the Rangdan warriors. Dreadnoughts were awakened, and all Terminators were deployed, yet they still couldn't suppress the charge of tens of thousands of Rangdan. They endured bolter fire and heavy weapons, broke through the Imperial high walls, and surged into the front lines to slaughter the mortal auxiliary army. In just over 10 minutes, Urian lost contact with 5,000 of his brothers, the Legion suffered heavy casualties. Skilled veteran legionaries were besieged by Rangdan warriors and torn apart by Xenos overlords. The battle was completely one-sided, with the Rangdan overwhelming the 1st Legion with sheer numbers. Urian was heartbroken. His gaze met that of the Rangdan overlord, and both began to charge at each other. He couldn't wait for the Primarch, couldn't wait for his Legion brothers to die gloriously. Urian charged towards the Rangdan overlord, determined to fight it to the death. Just as Urian was about to charge, the Rangdan army suddenly retreated like a tide, beginning to reorganize their lines. Grand Master Urian, you seem a bit impatient. A calm yet authoritative voice came through the comms channel. Blaskowitz knew that the Grand Master of the First Legion had used unsavory methods to lead this battle. Great Primarch, I dare not beg for your forgiveness. Urian's voice choked, tears welled in his eyes, and the Grand Master wept. He looked up at the sky, and through the swirling smoke of battle, white fleets of warships were faintly visible. Led by a blue flagship, they emerged from the warp one after another into the real universe. Blaskowitz's fleet had arrived in the Morse solar system ahead of schedule, an anomaly even he couldn't explain. It was a very strange feeling. In his perception, the fleet's journey was normal, it had indeed traveled through the warp for 60 days. Sophia had also instructed the fleet to prepare for battle 3 days prior. However, upon reaching the destination, after cross-referencing times, the First Fleet had arrived a few days early. He currently had no time to ponder the specific reasons, more urgent matters awaited him. First, gather the forces, repel the Xenos, and then we'll discuss other matters. Blaskowitz temporarily did not pursue the Grand Master's responsibility, the battle had just begun. As you command. The Grand Master's eyes were filled with tears, grateful for the Primarch's generosity. If the Primarch had ordered him to commit suicide, he would not have hesitated. Everyone. The Primarch has arrived. Slay the Xenos. The Grand Master roared, raising his longsword and re-engaging the Rangdan warriors. The arrival of a Primarch invigorated the Imperial forces immensely, there was no news more uplifting than this. The Xenos fleet swarmed forward, preparing to annihilate the warships entering the star system, they had overwhelming numbers. Blaskowitz was not flustered, the fleet's combat power lay not in quantity, but in the quality of its technological superiority. He was not in a hurry to clear the star system but drew a dividing line, encompassing 1/3 of the star system with Morse at its core. First, they would steadily occupy this area, then clear out the Rangdan Xenos entrenched in the star system. The First Fleet's 100 capital ships, along with various destroyers and frigates, left the main fleet to clear the combat zone designated by King Noak. Main cannon ready. Attack the battle moon. Blaskowitz sat steadily on his throne, continuously issuing commands. Fleet scatter, destroy enemy warships, cover the advance of the landing craft, and deploy troops to Morse. The forward gunports of the Royal Majesty opened, and a central axial main cannon was charging, aimed at the battle moon in Morse's orbit. Dimensional conduit open, penetrating enemy shields. Gates reported, constantly monitoring the main cannon's status. A pale blue glow shot from the edge of the main cannon, like a straw piercing a bubble, penetrating the battle moon's multiple shields. Although the Rangdan didn't understand why the newly arrived human reinforcements differed so greatly from their intelligence. Attack! Attack! Stop the humans' actions. But seeing the shields penetrated, the Xenos commander organized an artillery barrage, launching an attack on the humans' gigantic flagship. Immediately, lance beams, plasma energy, and various accelerated projectiles rained down on the Royal Majesty. All weapons on the hemisphere facing the human warship opened fire. The density of fire was enough to tear apart an asteroid, and after a long flight, it struck the Royal Majesty's shield, only to be swallowed by the dimensional shield and vanish. Molecular disintegration cannon fully charged, ready to fire at any moment. Gates' disc-shaped head lifted, as if looking at Blaskowitz, awaiting his command. Destroy the Xenos, creation. Blaskowitz gave the order for destruction without mercy. Understood. The cold synthetic voice seemed somewhat excited as Gates pressed the virtual projection's fire control key. There was no impact or cannon roar, only energy pouring out. A bright white stream of particles erupted from the main cannon, guided by the dimensional conduit, shooting towards the Xenos, battle moon. The particle stream was incredibly beautiful, like the long tail of a comet, streaking across the void of space. Seeing the humans making such a grand display, firing a high-energy particle stream, the Rangdan overlord, surprisingly, was no longer nervous. Such an energy level, even with a direct hit, would not be able to penetrate the battle moon's outer armor. At the moment of impact, a piercing alarm blared in the Xenos command center. Overlord. The battle moon is being destroyed. A Rangdan reported, and on the holographic image, the destroyed area continuously expanded. What is this, exactly? The Overlord roared in fury, white smoke rising from its bio-armor. Why isn't this information in our intelligence? From outer space, the hid area of the battle moon glowed crimson, expanding in a ring. The molecular disintegration cannon, a relic technology from the Golden Age. This weapon, by releasing a certain energy field or particle beam, triggers a chain collapse of the target material's molecular structure. Once activated, the destructive effect spreads like a domino effect, disintegrating all matter within the target area. This includes organic, inorganic matter, and even starships, breaking them down into elementary particles or inert dust. It was one of the star-destroying weapons carried by the Royal Majesty. Once it hits a target, the disintegration effect will not stop until the targeted object is completely disintegrated and can no longer produce a chain reaction. On the planet Morse, the Grand Master, fighting fiercely with the Rangdan, suddenly felt the planet's angle shift slightly. He looked up, and the battle moon suspended in orbit was being disintegrated by some weapon, gradually losing mass. Look. The Primarch has disintegrated the Xenos, space station. They are fragile before the Emperor's sun. For the Emperor. The Grand Master roared, an inexhaustible strength erupting from his body as he charged into the Xenos ranks. The surrounding temperature plummeted, psychic lightning flashed on the front lines, and then burst into a brilliant light. 100 towering warriors materialized from the teleportation light, clad in golden armor, with red plumes on their helmets, and their cloaks fluttering in the battle-scarred airwaves. Grand Master Urian was momentarily stunned. The appearance of the Custodes was completely unexpected. Before he could react, the Emperor's personal bodyguards, wielding halberds and great swords, charged towards the Rangdan. Like a thunderous storm, like autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. The Golden Warriors' movements were astonishingly fast. In the blink of an eye, they plunged into the Rangdan battle formation, slaughtering Xenos warriors as if butchering pigs and dogs. The Rangdan overlord was cut into several pieces by the Custodes in just 2 exchanges. The Emperor. The auxiliary army shouted loudly, their mortal bodies trembling. If not for the battlefield, they would have knelt on the spot. The Custodes were an extension of the Emperor's will, legendary warriors who lived in myths, whom they were rarely lucky enough to see in their lifetimes. Urian Bendigray. A Custodian shield captain stood before the Grand Master, looking down at his face, his voice cold and emotionless. I am commanded by Primarch Blaskowitz Novik to assist you in battle. What do you require assistance with? Normally, Urian would have politely declined. But this was no time for politeness, so he pointed into the distance, where the Titan Legion was barely holding on, with only 3 Warlord Titans still active. The Xenos Titans, Primarch has his own arrangements. The shield captain glanced over, then withdrew his gaze, explaining to the Grand Master, Doom Slayers will eliminate them. Atlantis Titan. The shield captain pointed to space, signaling the Grand Master to look. They have arrived. In outer space, 10 large objects penetrated the atmosphere, burning with flames as they descended towards the Titan battlefield. The mechanical sarcophagus, enveloped in orangered flames from atmospheric friction, descended like a falling star. Inside the trembling sarcophagus, the steel giant awoke from its slumber, its subsystems activating in sequence, connecting to the main control neural network. Ra, clad in gleaming golden armor, stood within the cockpit. Beneath his feet was a suspended platform, surrounded by a circular field simulator, where light, shadow, and flowing metal formed terrain images. On the surface of his armor, a layer of dense nanometer sensory receivers floated, feeding every movement of the operator to the Atlantis Titan's neural sensors. Neural operating system connected, the super-intelligent chip within the armor relayed the system feedback, synchronizing with Atlantis system. Ra felt his consciousness dissipate, his mind entering a space composed of cold logic, numbers, and rationality. Hello, operator. Though the voice was a greeting, it echoed in the depths of his soul, strangely like a self-inquiry. Ra's extremely resilient mental will bridged with the cold logical consciousness, and the two became one. He felt his thoughts amplified, arriving in a body forged of steel, brimming with power. Hello, Atlantean, Ra's consciousness spoke, feeling at ease, without a hint of pressure. The Atlantis Titan possessed advanced intelligence, allowing the operator's mind to be maximally liberated, without needing to focus on the Titan itself. It was like a normal human, where the brain is responsible for thinking and focusing on what is happening, while the body has its own rules of operation. Compared to the Empire's Titans, Argent Noor's Atlantis Titan had a more advanced operating system and more intuitive controls. Synchronization complete. Ra instinctively trembled, his consciousness returning to his body, in sync with the mecha. Our wills are one. Boom. The mechanical sarcophagus split open in midair, revealing the giant humanoid Titan within. The Titan looked down in a human-like manner, its legs slightly bent. Brace for impact, open the foot-dispersing force field. This was a thought, and the synchronized neural operating system completed the action within nanoseconds. Ra's body floated in the air, enveloped by the nanometer sensory system, which compressed his body, providing resistance synchronized with the mecha's perception. This allowed the operator to be fully synchronized with the Atlantean, experiencing the same external environment and making corresponding judgments. Thump, thump, thump. The ground trembled as 10 Atlantis Titans landed, kicking up a sky-high cloud of dust, crashing into the battlefield where Titans were clashing. The Rangdan bio-mechas retreated, reorganizing their lines, preparing to face the human reinforcement troops. The ground battle was completely reversed. Humanity had destroyed the battle moon, blockading the Morse world's orbit. Before the outcome of the space naval battle was decided, there would be no further reinforcements for the ground forces. 100 Rangdan Titan machines quickly retreated to advantageous positions, their weapons beginning to charge. After the dust settled, the towering humanoid machines stood up, displaying their exceptionally majestic forms. By the Omniscia. The Adeptus Mechanicus members, seeing the 100-meter-tall figures, their cold mechanical voices faltered, "Om, Messiah." The steel figures, cloaked and towering, made the mechanical worshippers kneel. The red-robed figures chanted binary hymns, praising the Omniscia. Urian and the custodian guards' thoughts paused for a moment as they looked at the humanoid machines, their eyes blazing with envious light. No matter when, no matter how superhuman the physique and modifications, men found it difficult to resist the unique beauty of machinery. To be able to pilot such exquisite and powerful machines was indeed enviable. The Atlantis Titan stood 100 meters tall, with 2 large cannons mounted on its shoulders. Its humanoid head had 2 horns, combining human aesthetics with the aggression of a beast. Titans, please withdraw, this place is ours. A communication came through the mecha's loudspeaker, openly expressing disdain for the Xenos. The humanoid mecha's voice was unique, possessing human emotion mixed with the distinctive, low growl of machinery. It was as if humanity and machines had achieved a fusion of humanity and mechanics. Thank you for your rescue. Here is intelligence on the Xenos Titans. The Warlord Titan captain thanked the machines that had descended from the sky, sending information about the Xenos. They turned, dragging their weary and damaged bodies away, confidently handing over the battlefield. As for whether they could win. With such machinery towering, the question wasn't whether they could win, but how they would win. Bigger is better. Ra turned to face the Xenos. The Atlantis Titan instantly synchronized its movements, even subtly rising and falling with his breath. The 100-meter-tall Atlantis Titan, cloaked and wielding a gigantic dimensional weapon, slashed towards the Xenos formation. The Rangdan Titan cluster seemed to sense the threat, the gaze projected by their machines locking tightly onto their movements. Woo, 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 finally, a Rangdan pilot could no longer endure it, driving a gigantic bio-armor to charge towards the human machinery. HMPH. The Atlantean let out a human-like roar, igniting the dimensional halberd in its hand, dragging it on the ground to plow deep furrows, and charged towards the Xenos Titan cluster. To the disbelief of all, the 100-meter-tall humanoid machine began to run. Oh Messiah! Only such a body can be your great incarnation. The Adeptus Mechanicus priests and tech priests were stunned by the running figure, the data streams in their minds becoming so chaotic that they glitched. Our weapons cannot lock onto the human machines. Inside the Rangdan Titan, the operators discovered that their targeting systems were being interfered with and could not lock onto the enemy. The Atlantis Titan's head horns were not just decorative, they were functional antennae, targeting disruptors. They emitted a unique electromagnetic wave that enveloped the entire mecha, interfering with enemy targeting. The ground trembled with each colossal step, and every movement of the Atlantis Titan caused a violent sonic boom at the tips of its limbs. Due to its immense size, a small movement of a joint resulted in a very large, rapid movement at the limb's extremity. Ra charged forward, feeling only the world tremble beneath his feet, the mecha's halberd twirled in his hand. Then he jumped. That's right, he jumped in the operating space, and the Atlantis Titan jumped in the real universe. The powerful plasma reactor generated extremely high output, injecting energy into millions of artificial muscle groups, unleashing unimaginable power. The Titan leapt high, its foot-dispersing force field shutting off, and delivered a powerful jump kick to a 50-meter Rangdan Titan. A dull thud echoed, a visible shockwave exploded, the Xenos shield overloaded, its chest bio-armor shattered, and it was knocked to the ground by the immense force. Like an adult humiliating a child, The Rangdan Titan struggled and rolled on the ground, unable to get back up. Ra turned again, his movements incredibly fluid, and swept his halberd horizontally, slaying another Xenos Titan. The Atlantean possessed mobility far exceeding its size, a towering giant slaughtering the Xenos war machines. The slightly smaller Rangdan Titans didn't even qualify for the Doom Slayer to use its weapons. The 50-meter small models, attempting to use their mobility to harass, were crushed into pieces by the steel feet, as casually as a mortal stepping on a mouse. The 30-meter medium models were kicked kilometers away by a powerful kick from the Atlantean, disintegrating in midair. The 10 Atlantis Titans displayed absolute dominance, overwhelming the 100 Rangdan Titans without even needing to use their shoulder-mounted heavy cannons. The Atlantean's mobility was terrifying, its running speed was faster than the Rangdan's upper body rotation, clearly not a match of the same caliber. The soft cape on the mecha's back, made of light diffusing material, could generate light and shadow illusions, obscuring the mecha's true movements. The movements of the swinging halberd were elusive, surrounded by several faint illusions, leaving the Xenos unsure how to dodge. The dimensional halberd and great axe ignored all shields and armor, each swing resulting in the destruction of a machine and the death of its pilot. Human. Take this. Sirens blared across the field, a hysterical roar deafening, "Feel the vengeful wrath of my race." Several Rangdan Titans sacrificed themselves to gain a visual targeting opportunity, their shoulder-mounted plasma cannons roaring in anger, seeking revenge for their fallen kin. Incompetent roars. Ra didn't want to use his shield to block, analyzing the firing trajectory within nanoseconds. He shifted slightly to the side, and the 100-meter-tall war machine flexibly dodged the plasma cannon attack. How is that possible? The Rangdan could not believe what they saw. The firing opportunity gained through sacrifice was dodged by an insignificant movement from the enemy. Nothing is impossible. Ra's words were filled with contempt, as the dimensional halberd sliced the Titan in half, detonating its reactor. You have witnessed power beyond imagination, and your hearts simply refuse to believe it. 5 minutes after landing, most of the Xenos Titans were destroyed, the remaining ones lying on the ground, unable to rise. After clearing the landing zone, Ra stood, leaning on the gigantic halberd, and called the Titan transport ship through the comms channel, releasing the mortal Titans. Titans can land now. Mechanical thrones descended from the sky, and Argent Noor's auxiliary army's Titan units were deployed into the battlefield. The mortal auxiliary army of Argent Noor, possessing its own Titans, was a product of Atlantean technological devolution. Compared to the highly mobile Atlantean Titans, which focused on Titan combat, the mortal Titans leaned towards long-range firepower. Completely operated by mortals, their technological path, after several iterations, formed its own distinct branch, independent of the Sentinels and Doom Slayer. 100 Custodes teleported into the arena, with the Blade Champion leading the charge. Among the Custodes, those called Champion naturally possessed formidable combat power, wielding gigantic power swords. The Blade Champion was unstoppable, and alien overlords fell one after another. Occasionally, stray plasma cannon shots hit the Custodes, but the flickering dimensional shields blocked the attacks, ensuring their safety. An ancient Terran proverb states, "He who eats from another's hand is beholden to them." The gifts from Argent Noor had added powerful protection to the superhuman warriors, increasing their combat power severalfold. The Custodes greatly appreciated this gesture, and naturally fought with even greater vigor on the battlefield. Abominations, face the wrath of the Emperor. The Blade Champion roared, now fully immersed in the thrill of battle, swinging his seemingly cumbersome greatsword with exquisite precision. The Custodes rarely displayed strong emotions, their minds were relatively calm, almost ruthlessly efficient. But the Blade Champion was different, he was the Emperor's most valiant fighter, needing to unleash pure fury upon the enemy. Every attack angle was incredibly precise, and each swing of his sword brought down several aliens. The Rangdan front line at this moment was repeatedly oscillating between regrouping and collapsing. Under the Custodes' charge, the unprepared Rangdan army, tens of thousands of elite warriors, found it difficult to mount any threatening offensive. Seizing this opportunity, Urian redeployed the Imperial front line, setting up defenses to await the next wave of impact. As a commander, the Grand Master was well aware that the Custodes' charge and the Titans' victory were temporary. Once the Rangdan adapted to the Custodes' attacks, the golden-armored warriors might find themselves deeply encircled. Urian knew he had no right to question how a Primarch arranged the Custodes. He fulfilled his duties by reorganizing the Imperial defensive line. Even with a Primarch present and the Custodes helping to stabilize the line, he still had to perform his duties well. He observed that the Rangdan's mortal servants had already withdrawn, moving around to the rear of the Hive City to regroup within it. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, the upcoming battle would still be a war of attrition. Imperial legions, ensure your safety, a grand voice announced as Urian deployed his troops, pay attention to what's above your heads. He looked up and saw an Atlantis Titan, which, after dealing with the alien Titans, had run to the edge of the battlefield between the two sides. Upon hearing this, the Custodes, who were in the midst of charging, immediately abandoned their nearby enemies, retreating with astonishing speed. The Rangdan elite warriors looked up at the giant blocking the sun, completely bewildered. This area was protected by a shield, making Titan weapons largely ineffective. They could only be spectators. Could it be that the pilot of this humanoid mecha had some peculiar voyeuristic hobbies? When the Rangdan Titans fell, they didn't even have time to issue a warning that the human Titans' weapons could penetrate the shield. As they watched the golden-armored human warriors run quickly and still wanted to pursue them, the human mecha raised the gigantic halberd in its hand. Then, inside the cockpit, revealed a smile. The feeling of killing ants was truly satisfying. The Atlantean brought his halberd down with force, raising waves of mud in the bloody filth, carving out a deep trench. With a horizontal sweep of the halberd, Rangdan warriors fell like stalks of wheat, stunning both the Imperial defense line and the Rangdan Warmaster. This was not the end. The mecha knelt on one knee, sweeping its halberd back and forth, crushing the Rangdan line, causing chaos in their formation and screams echoing everywhere. Run! The Rangdan elite warriors shrieked, abandoning their respective lines and fleeing desperately towards the human hive city in the rear. No creature could remain composed when facing the attacks of a towering giant. They had completely lost their courage, and amidst the disarray of their formation, they propelled their biological armor's 6 omnidirectional legs, rapidly retreating to the rear. Slowly stood up, holding the halberd with one hand and wiping the mud from the weapon with the other. He did not pursue. The Atlantis Titans' orders were to help the Empire maintain the front line and repel the Rangdan, nothing more. After completing its mission, the Atlantis Titan dragged the alien Titan wreckage together and collectively incinerated the alien creations. This was a Primarch's order, an order that brooked no doubt. The Rangdan were a strange alien species. Any of their creations were to be completely eliminated to prevent future trouble. The Adeptus Mechanicus priests looked on with pained expressions as the alien Titans were melted by plasma. There were still some admirable aspects to the alien creations. Argent Noor's mortal Titans then descended. They were 60 meters tall, with a fixed rapid-fire composite cannon on their left arm, and a human-like right arm carrying various siege weapons. At the Titan engagement site, the mortal Titans leveled the ground, allowing the Noor auxiliary army to land. The Rangdan were terrified. They hid inside the human hive city, keeping the gates tightly shut and not daring to come out. This was a critical period for humanity to regain its spirit and deploy new forces. Landing ships slowly descended, and the Noor auxiliary army slowly marched out in square formations, beginning to deploy defenses at the landing point. Urian glanced over, and with the Space Marine's excellent vision combined with the helmet's built-in optical magnification, he clearly saw the Noor auxiliary army. A flash of surprise crossed his eyes. The auxiliary army from a Primarch's world exuded strength just from their appearance. They averaged over 1.9 meters in height, with robust, powerful physiques, uniform military bearing, and abundant spirit. The mortal soldiers wore full-coverage power armor, which looked quite protective, and their weapons had a good appearance, suggesting considerable power. Urian nodded continuously. He had seen countless mortal auxiliary armies, and this was a powerful force. Although there were slight signs of inexperience, they would undergo a transformation after just one battle. Before the Grand Master could finish his lament, the next scene astonished him. He had heard that the Noor stars extensively adopted machinery and even had the right to use AI. But what he saw left him speechless, feeling immense shock for a moment. Several tall machines of various forms walked at the forefront. Urian immediately recognized them as Iron Man AI. And behind them were standardized automated soldiers, densely arrayed in square formations, emerging from the landing ships. The automated soldiers were only half a man's height, with 4 mechanical legs as a chassis, a rectangular central control unit on top, and 4 large-caliber weapons on either side of the control unit. Their firepower was astonishing, and their design was simple and elegant. 1 to 10. The Grand Master mentally calculated. Argent Noor had landed 100,000 auxiliary army soldiers, equipped with 1 million automated soldiers. As the automated soldiers emerged, several Almatertal mecha also walked out, arrayed neatly at the landing point. A large amount of engineering machinery also landed, beginning to construct barracks and defensive facilities, preparing for the battle against the aliens. In space, Blaskowitz was commanding the fleet's operations. The situation did not allow for any relaxation. The Rangdan's counterattack was relentless, frantically assaulting the alert line he had drawn, trying to break through to reinforce Morse. Argent Noor's ships continuously repelled the Rangdan, stabilizing the defensive line, but the First Fleet's ship numbers were far inferior to the Rangdan's. The fleet was providing support in various locations, as the Rangdan attacked from multiple positions, probing for the First Fleet's weak points. Primarch. A communication came through the channel, spoken with supreme reverence. Blaskowitz's face was expressionless, maintaining the dignity befitting a Primarch, but deep down, he felt considerably more relaxed. 1 hour after the First Fleet arrived, the First Legion's fleet made contact, arriving just in time. How many ships do you still have? Blaskowitz lightly raised his chin, asking the Lord of the Legion, of the First Legion in a condescending manner. Reporting, Primarch, the Lord of the Void Sky Army felt no impropriety. A Primarch should have such a demeanor. He carefully replied, our fleet has not suffered major losses, the fleet's structure is intact. Very good. Blaskowitz's heart secretly rejoiced, and he slowly nodded, his voice deep. Urian's arrangements were good, preserving strength was his most correct decision. The Lord of the Void Sky Army lowered his head, not daring to overstep or make excuses for the Grand Master. Split your fleet. Blaskowitz clicked on the holographic image, marking several important areas. Using 3 Gloriana Queens as the core, defend these areas. Your command will be obeyed. The Lord of the Void Sky Army stood at attention, fist pressed to his chest, performing the warrior's salute to the warrior king. The First Legion will never let a single alien escape. I have received your resolve. Blaskowitz nodded to him, affirming the Lord of the Legion's determination, and also issued a warning, do not be reckless, do not repeat past mistakes. Hearing the Primarch's pointed words, the Lord of the Legion's body trembled, his power armor creaking. The First Legion will not disappoint you. He knelt on one knee, head bowed, making a promise to the Primarch. Hurry and enter the battlefield. Blaskowitz gave a final instruction, dismissed the holographic projection, and focused his attention on the grand strategy. 0 comments 0 vote. Bomb away. Sir, and Xeno communication is coming through, Sophia said softly, appearing and standing by the command throne. Should I connect it? Blaskowitz nodded, his eyes narrowing. The Rangdan communication came at a very subtle time. It was neither too early nor too late. The Imperium of Man fleet had joined the battle, and with the ground war going poorly, the communication arrived. Connect it, Blaskowitz said, wanting to hear what Rangdan had to say. He then ordered, obscure the bridge in my figure. Understood. With a flick of Sophia's fair hand, the holographic image went dark, showing only the Imperial Aquila. The holographic image outlined a floating, dark green brain with golden eyes and an ugly face, its tentacles below slick and numerous. I am Warmaster Lolos of Rangdan, Lolos declared openly, not wearing bio armor. Seeing the dark image and the symbol of the Imperium of Man, its voice had a slow, halting quality. Human, do you not dare face your opponent? Its voice was arrogant, with a hint of psychic pollution designed to provoke anger. I didn't expect you to be such a coward. Humans are indeed inferior. Blaskowitz's voice, processed, was as cold as ice that had not melted for 1,000 years. Put away your crude taunts, Xeno. You wish to glimpse my appearance, to have the Imperium of Man's dogs collect information on me. I have never considered you opponents anyway, just a bunch of ugly Xenos, filth to be purged by lances of light. As soon as the fleet contacted Urian, the Grand Master immediately submitted the intelligence, without any delay. Blaskowitz's words were calm, deliberately revealing to Lolos that he knew about the existence of traitors within the Imperium of Man. The purpose was simple, he was probing Rangdan to see how much they knew about the Imperium of Man. The Xenos knew nothing about the Nor fleet's intelligence, but they certainly knew about his participation in the expedition. They knew the Imperium of Man had dispatched the First Legion, as well as the specific number of troops, and had set up a trap here. If it hadn't been him who came today, but one of his other brothers, the battle wouldn't have been so straightforward. The leaked Imperial intelligence allowed Rangdan to acquire data on Imperial equipment, preparing them for a well-planned battle. This demonstrated the immense power of the First Legion. Despite their equipment intelligence being fully compromised, they could still fight the Rangdan warriors back and forth, with a casualty ratio crushing the Xenos. Had it been another legion, the ground forces might have paid several times the price. Indeed, traitors within the Imperium of Man are collecting information on you, Blaskowitz Novik. Lolos admitted it openly, even calling Blaskowitz by his name, proudly displaying its intelligence network. Oh. Blaskowitz showed a hint of interest, his words tinged with sarcasm. Then please hurry up, for while you know information about me, you don't know much. You know very little about the fleet and technological strength of the newer stars. Lolo's tentacles twitched a few times. It keenly caught the crucial information about the newer stars. It had no cheeks, showed no expression, but inwardly it was disdainful. Lolos sneered inwardly, believing that the superindividual on the other side, called a Primarch, was getting carried away by victory, unaware that he had leaked crucial information. Behind the holographic image, Blaskowitz's lips curled into a cold smile. Information on the newer stars was sealed in the Imperial Archives, a top-secret classification guarded by the Custodian Guard. Fewer than 100 officials in the entire Imperium of Man were authorized to view the Nor archives. That was a trap. Whoever accessed the archives recently would be the traitor controlled by Rangdan. If Rangdan understood the implications and was unwilling to abandon its traitor, and went to great lengths to infiltrate the newer stars, then so be it. I have a proposal here, Lolos said, changing the subject after obtaining the information. My race is willing to withdraw from this star system and relinquish control of it. We are also willing to cease hostilities with humanity and pledge not to expand into this star sector again. Has something gone wrong with your slick, filthy brain? Although he knew the Xenos were changing the subject, and even that the proposal might be genuine. Blaskowitz couldn't help but snap, shake hands and make peace. Does Rangdan seem to have a brain, but in fact doesn't? Get lost, you psychic manipulating Xeno. He waved his hand in disgust, telling Sophia to cut the communication. He truly didn't know if Rangdan was genuinely foolish or just pretending to be. After learning about Rangdan's psychic pollution and control, the Imperium of Man had to eliminate Rangdan, and completely eradicate the Rangdan species. Shake hands and make peace. If they did, it wouldn't be long before Rangdan's psychic spies infiltrated every aspect of humanity, eventually enslaving the human race completely. As for abandoning the Morse solar system, it was merely a temporary compromise to redeem the Rangdan warriors. Tens of thousands of elite Rangdan warriors, the mid-tier combat power of the Xenos, they could not accept such massive losses. Analogous to the Imperium of Man, the Imperium of Man could not abandon an entire legion. Blaskowitz sat at the command console, shaking his head and focusing his attention on the defensive line, guarding against a Rangdan surprise attack. The Rangdan fleet was enormous, crammed into the Chemos star system. The Xenos' initial plan should have been to hunt him, or one of his Primarch brothers. They had committed a large number of forces to Morse world, aiming to destroy a legion of the Imperium of Man. But now the situation had reversed. The Rangdan warriors trapped on Morse had become a critical vulnerability for the Xenos. If they hadn't been trapped, the Rangdan fleet might have already left. The plan had failed, and Morse world was no longer worth the Rangdan's effort. The sooner they left, the better. The Rangdan fleet continuously assaulted the human blockade, aiming to rescue their kin and preserve their elite fighting force. Blaskowitz paid no attention to the ground battlefield. The slicing meat with a dull knife strategy he had set would naturally be executed by others. The Rangdan on Morse had to be annihilated. Slowly annihilating them and quickly annihilating them would have vastly different effects. The ground commander executing the Primarch's orders was a Legion warrior, Autumn. As one of the original 10 warriors, Autumn was among the first to study at the War College, showing great interest in warfare. He was held in high regard by Blaskowitz. Autumn commanded from the fortress, not daring to relax for a moment, knowing he bore the expectations of his gene father. The Primarch hoped the Doom Slayers would be versatile, not just battle-focused brutes. On a grand battlefield, a superhuman warrior had a role, but could not fundamentally change the tide of battle. Unless that warrior could single-handedly cut through enemy defenses and personally slay the enemy commander. The Primarch required Doom Slayers, in addition to their personal combat prowess, to each be capable of commanding at least 1 million troops. Autumn took command of the mortal forces and would lead a 1,000,000-strong army to attack the hive city occupied by Rangdan. The command room was large. Besides Autumn, there were black-armored Doomslayers and golden-armored Custodian Guard. Several Iron Men stood in the distance, exchanging information and discussing the Rangdan threat and its mysterious psychic control. They did not participate in command, but were stationed in the command room, ready at all times. He whispered into his comms channel, calling his brother and issuing combat orders. Can the Atlantis Titan weapons destroy the Hive City's power reactors? To instill fear in the Xenos, their protective umbrella had to be shattered. Yes. Law's affirmative reply brought joy to Autumn's heart. But it's not allowed, his brother added. As for the specific reason, you should know. Understood. Autumn nodded, thinking of other methods. The Gene Father strictly forbade the use of special units, and even psychic communication, to test the abilities of his progeny. He wanted them to capture the Xeno Hive City using Nor standard armament. Under these restrictions, Autumn had no choice but to suppress his eagerness and wait for the auxiliary army equipment to land, then let's wait for the equipment to arrive. The Gene Father controlled the overall situation and was not in a hurry to annihilate the Rangdan army. He had requested the slicing meat with a dull knife approach. Facing shields, Nor had special methods to pry open the unbreakable turtle shell. As the star disappeared, the combat hemisphere of Morse plunged into night, and the battlefield fell silent. Occasionally, sparks erupted in the night sky as warships were continuously destroyed. The ground battlefield, however, was quiet. The Rangdan hid within the Hive City, not showing themselves, while their human servants took detours to return to their respective Hive cities. Autumn was not concerned about those servant armies, they would eventually be encircled. An army with no defensive capabilities. The Nor Auxiliary Army's armory contained plenty of weapons of mass destruction. Sir, the City Breaker Cannon has been assembled. The voice of a mortal technician rang out, excitedly reporting the progress to Autumn. Good. Autumn rose from the command console and walked out of the command fortress. He wanted to witness the City Breaker Cannon's attack firsthand. A colossal cannon with a barrel diameter of 100 meters lay on the ground, flanked by super heavy treads flush with the cannon. Behind it were 4 plasma reactors, and 10-meter-thick energy conduits supplied its power. This giant cannon, named City Breaker, was 500 meters long, its muzzle pointing ominously at the Hive City. The siege breaker's massive tracks rumbled, and the gaping beast slowly moved towards its designated position. It settled into its position, a 45-degree opening in front forming its exclusive firing arc. As a type of siege breaker weapon, there are various kinds of siege breakers. Their design is complex, the ground firing environment is not comparable to the relatively vacuum of space. The siege breaker cannon is not a kinetic weapon. If it were to fire ultra-large caliber solid projectiles like a ship's macro cannon, the impact would be enough to destroy its firing position. At 1/10 the speed of light, if fired close to the ground, enemies protected by shields might not die, but the firing position would absolutely be destroyed by the impact. Warlord, everything is ready. We can fire at any moment, a mortal technician respectfully handed over a data slate, his eyes gleaming with reverence. The genetic scions of King Noak, like that great one, were tall and brave. Thank you, Autumn took the data slate. As his golden armor touched the data slate, the auxiliary AI within the armor immediately understood its contents. In fact, no contact was necessary, retrieving data with a superintelligent chip was not difficult. The reason he personally took it was to consider the mortals' feelings and fulfill the technicians' expectations for their efforts. Excellent, Autumn nodded. Your professional skills are superb, you haven't wasted your usual training. It was commendable that a steel behemoth like the Siege Breaker was assembled by 10,000 technicians over 12 hours without a single error throughout the process. Thank you for your praise. Praised by a legendary warrior, the technician stood at attention, chest puffed out with pride. Autumn climbed the observation tower, looking down at the giant cannon from above, then gazing at the distant Hive City. Fire! He ordered via the communication channel, instructing the technicians to unleash the power of the Siege Breaker cannon, tear down the Xenos' defenses, and let them fear every action of humanity. As you command, Lord. Buzz. The Siege Breaker cannon's body vibrated, and the dust on its barrel shook, slowly falling from both sides. The vibrating Siege Breaker was one type among many siege breakers. Within the abyssal maw of the cannon's muzzle, tiny vibration mechanisms were neatly arranged, emitting dense, minute vibration frequencies. When the vibration frequencies converged, the cannon's built-in containment field projected the high-frequency wave towards the direction the Siege Breaker cannon was aimed. Hem. Like the long breath of a giant beast, the vibration frequency was visible to the naked eye, a white, transparent wave about 100 meters thick. At a glance, the vibration wave appeared like a dissonance in a high-definition image, a sudden grainy texture that blurred space and time. The vibration wave tore apart molecular bonds, the ground began to decompose, ripped apart by billions of instantaneous resonances from the vibration wave, shattering molecular bonds and disintegrating matter into a cloud of free atoms. Tens of kilometers were covered in an instant, and the vibration wave slammed into the outer wall of the hive city, immediately triggering a warp shield reaction, causing the hit area to glow with warp radiance. Warp shields are powerful shields that teleport objects traveling at a certain speed into the warp, protecting the objects beneath the shield. Only weapons that traverse other dimensions, such as dimensional weapons or phase weapons, can penetrate a warp shield. All matter in the real universe cannot bypass a warp shield. Seeing the shield block the human siege weapon, Warmaster Lolos of the Rangdan breathed a sigh of relief. It had to be said, the shield technology of the human slaves far surpassed the Rangdan's energy shields. But soon, the stone Lolos had laid down in his heart was suspended again. The siege weapon's wave did not dissipate, the human weapon was not instantaneous but a continuous, sustained beam. It's over. Lolos thought, feeling helpless and despairing. His deeply grooved brain trembled violently, secreting stress-induced mucus. He hated himself for not staying on the orbital battleship and instead landing to fight a decisive battle with the human legion. After the battle moon was destroyed, he and the Rangdan elites were trapped here, their only reliance being the human hive city's shield. The siege breaker's high-frequency vibration wave continuously bombarded the warp shield, causing bursts of warp purple light. Due to the continuous effect, the warp shield transformed from ethereal to tangible, its energy membrane pulled by the vibration wave cannon, triggering a catastrophic resonance. It was an unprecedented spectacle. Both the Imperial and Argent Noor positions looked towards the hive city. The semi-transparent warp shield membrane, its warp radiance gradually spreading from the point of attack to the entire hemisphere. Then its brightness gradually increased, like a half-moon close at hand, illuminating the night sky of Morse. The warp shield's brightness continuously increased, its beauty before shattering, a tragic splendor that could even be admired from orbital space. Crash, crash, crash. The warp shield, exposed to continuous bombardment for 20 minutes, emitted its most brilliant warp radiance, finally overloading from the vibration wave's resonance. Resonance differed from orbital bombardment. It was a continuous attack, requiring far more energy from the warp shield than orbital bombardment. One was a sustained output, the other fleeting. They could not be compared. The moment the warp shield overloaded, the siege breaker cannon's vibration wave slammed into the hive city wall, and in less than 1% of a second, it penetrated the wall, dozens of meters thick. The vibration wave was unstoppable, molecularizing any matter in its path. The human slaves behind the city wall had no time to react, being turned into molecular dust by the high-frequency vibration. The biological armor of the Rangdan elite warriors was no different from human flesh and blood. Wherever the vibration frequency wave passed, nearby objects were annihilated into dust, while slightly more distant ones experienced astonishing explosions. Freed from the constraints of the containment field, the high-frequency vibration wave spread, triggering nuclear fission reactions in certain areas where the vibration wave was suitable. A line of fire appeared in the hive city, filled with nuclear explosions and molecular dust shattered by the vibrations. Stone, steel, flesh and blood, everything was decomposed into basic molecules. The vibration wave advanced all the way, piercing through all protective measures, striking the plasma reactor at the heart of the hive city. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion, and the brightly lit hive city erupted in flames. The plasma reactor exploded, collapsing one-third of the buildings. When the flames subsided, only a sky full of smoke and a darkened hive city remained. Yeah! A thunderous cheer erupted from the Imperial position, Space Marines and mortals cheered together. The long-suppressed frustration of being besieged by Xenos was now swept away, venting their inner gloom. Urian took off his helmet, a smile on his face, his heart leaping, the gloom above his head completely gone. With the Xenos losing their shield protection, they were like sheep without a sheepfold, fearing the Imperial Iron Fist would fall at any moment. He looked at the siege weapon sprawled on the ground, amazed by its immense power, and began to make calculations in his mind. If the First Legion had such a weapon, wouldn't it be invincible? Such a siege weapon, he must find a way to acquire a few units. Urian took a deep breath, thinking for the benefit of the First Legion. Although he was a man with a crime, he still had to weigh judgment and duty. The Primarch had not yet condemned him, and he was still the Legion's Grand Master. Brother Urian Bendigray. Just then, a communication came through the comms channel. Brother Autumn, hello. Urian dared not neglect, quickly put on his helmet, and began a conversation with his cousin. Autumn said to Urian in the communication, Grand Master, please have the Imperial artillery aim at the hive city occupied by the Xenos. That might not be good. Urian was very reserved, and after some deliberation, he said, This is your honor, the glory of the Nur stars. Don't worry about it. Autumn's gaunt face showed a friendly smile. Now is not the time for a full attack. You have plenty of time to torment the Xenos, minds. Cousin, the Imperial army longs for revenge against the Xenos, don't they? So be it. Urian nodded in thanks, his eyes filled with unsuppressible joy. He solemnly thanked his cousin. Thank you for your generosity, for looking after the morale of the Empire. No need for that. Our common goal is to defeat the Rangdan Xenos. The Grand Master said no more, taking this generosity to heart, hoping to repay it someday. His cousin was open-minded, willing to share honor and spoils to boost the morale and combat effectiveness of Allied forces. The Imperial army needed a decent strike to retaliate against the Xenos' arrogance. To vent their inner frustration, boost army morale, and dispel their apprehension and fear of the Rangdan. Artillery, listen up. The Grand Master's lips curled into a wicked smile as he ordered the artillery commander. Artillery positions, aim at the hive city. Fire shells irregularly, let the Xenos experience what it feels like to constantly guard against attacks, sleeplessly. Receiving your command, Grand Master. The artillery commander was emotional as he accepted the order. The artillery positions aimed at the hive city, occasionally firing a few shells that landed in the dense building clusters. Without the protection of the warp shield, the Rangdan activated emergency power to supply anti-aircraft fire, blocking the incoming shells. The irregular, fierce shelling kept the Rangdan fully focused on defense, not daring to relax for a moment. Shortly after the hive city's void shield shattered, the Rangdan Xeno fleet suddenly ceased its attack and began to gather outside the defensive perimeter. Blaskowitz sat on his command throne, constantly reading the fleet's aggregated information, knowing that the Rangdan counterattack was imminent. But his strategic deployment was precisely designed to achieve this outcome. The Rangdan ground defenders were in a state of panic, constantly sending out calls for help, which prompted the Void Fleet to launch an offensive. Void Fleet battles are lengthy, and it would take several hours for the Rangdan fleet to withdraw and regroup. Blaskowitz observed the star system's sand table, filling in weak points in the defenses based on his own insights and the Iron Man's calculations. The addition of the 1st Legion's fleet undoubtedly provided significant assistance. Even if intelligence on the battleship was leaked, the 3 Gloriana-class battleships were still unshakable behemoths. The Indomitable Truth, Abomination Exemplar, and Royal Majesty were positioned at critical points along the defense line to maximize their effectiveness. The First Fleet's ships coordinated with the Imperial ships, alternating cover and fully utilizing their firepower and defensive advantages. With the defense line deployed, the Xeno fleet alone would find it difficult to shake the combined Argent Nur and Imperial fleets. Having completed all this, Blaskowitz shifted his gaze to the distant information, specifically to the Rangdan's remaining 2 battle moons. After the battle moon in Morse's orbit was destroyed, the Xenos, colossal space stations moved closer together, using their firepower advantage to cover each other. They stayed far from Morse world, far from the Royal Majesty, hiding behind the star. The battle moons had to be eliminated, they could not be allowed to withdraw and become a future threat. The Imperium had not yet discovered the full extent of Rangdan territory, and after the battle for Morse concluded, it would take a long time to find the Xenos. Allowing them to leave would be irresponsible for the future, it was better to nip the crisis in the bud and reduce future variables. Blaskowitz pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "Send me to the training ground." As his voice fell, the light of teleportation flared, and he arrived at the secluded edge of the training ground, unnoticed by anyone. He strode forward, heading towards the center of the training ground, where Custodes and Doom Slayers were sparring, and Sentinels were observing. 2 fragile stone swords scraped against each other with a rustling sound, as 2 warriors at the pinnacle of the physical universe competed using the restraint technique. Shield Captain, Blaskowitz greeted the custodian, his voice soft so as not to disturb the spar. The Shield Captain was startled, instinctively wanting to jump away, but felt a pressure on his shoulder, rendering him unable to move. Only after his mind caught up did he realize that the Primarch had silently approached him from behind. Although he had been focused on the ongoing spar, being approached silently by the Primarch still sent a cold sweat down his spine. He was about to open his mouth to greet him but saw the Primarch's gaze, signaling to talk aside. My lord, what are your orders? Entering a secluded rest cabin at the edge of the training ground, the shield captain finally spoke, is there a combat mission? Yes, shield captain Odysseus. Blaskowitz called out the custodian's name, derived from the hero of Greek legend. Sit. Blaskowitz gestured for Odysseus to sit, and he himself sat on a long bench. Odysseus set down his halberd, removed his helmet, and placed it on the table, sitting opposite the Primarch. He was a handsome man, with deep, striking features, possessing the charm of an ancient hero. Blaskowitz tapped the table, displaying a holographic projection, and began to explain his plan. I need 600 custodes to split into 2 groups, board the Xenos, battle moons, and destroy them from within. As he spoke, the holographic image changed, showing the external situation of the battle moons. As early as when they entered the star system, the First Fleet's reconnaissance ships had infiltrated the warp to gather intelligence on the battle moons. Through stealthy scans, the reconnaissance ships had done their utmost to analyze 1/10 of the battle moon's structural thickness. The Rangdon's colossal space stations were too large and had multiple layers of protection. It was not easy to obtain this intelligence without exposing the reconnaissance ships. My lord, forgive my frankness, Odysseus said after seeing the information, not immediately agreeing. Speak freely, Blaskowitz nodded, signaling him to express himself fully. How do we destroy it? Odysseus asked, are we to overload the battle moon's reactor? The space station is too large, with intricate and complex routes. If we deviate from the path, we will struggle to reach the target and instead be surrounded by the enemy. That is of no concern, the custodes fear no enemy. However, time is limited. If the Xenos decide to escape, entering the warp and taking us with them, the consequences would be dire. Odysseus finished his questions in one breath, took a drink offered by a service automaton, and waited for the Primarch's reply. You do not need to destroy the core, Blaskowitz said with a smile, shaking his head. He reactivated the holographic image, displaying a device as tall as a man. Odysseus' eyes widened abruptly as he saw the contents of the holographic image, instinctively reaching for his halberd. Lord Primarch, you are playing with fire. He warned the Primarch with a serious expression. The shield captain saw a transparent canister, its surface carved with the Primarch's insignia and other runes, filled with glowing warp energy. What made Odysseus so tense was that a demon was sealed inside. It was a corpulent, bloated greater demon of Nergal, its body covered in boils, its belly split open with maggots writhing, its spirit listless. His heart trembled, and his black eyes reflected the Primarch's figure, recalling the Emperor's charge to the custodes. Primarch number 21, he can do anything, including the utilization of chaos knowledge, possessing power equal to mine. Were it not for this charge from the Emperor, Odysseus would have questioned how the Primarch acquired such knowledge. The Doom Slayers will be responsible for escorting it. Once it reaches 1/3 of the battle moon's depth, simply detonate it. Blaskowitz offered no further explanation, trying to put the custodian at ease. It dares not escape, self-detonation is its only chance of survival. Argent Noor had long been developing psyker weapons, cautiously researching warp knowledge. In this endeavor, he had received support from Life Forger Primal, who had provided private research and knowledge specifically on demons. With Doom Slayers personally guarding the demon research facility, Psyker Masters, combining ancient knowledge, had developed several demon weapons. What Blaskowitz displayed was one of them. It was a corrosive bomb, created by capturing a greater demon of Nergal from the warp, utilizing the demon's characteristics, combined with time sorcery and time technology. Just one such time bomb, imbued with a corrosive virus, could cause a world to undergo 1,000,000 years of corrosion in 3 minutes. Unless the situation absolutely demanded it, Blaskowitz would not use demon weapons, they were too dangerous. Ships with sufficient firepower could not approach the battle moons, and the Xenos, having learned their lesson once, would surely flee immediately. Ships that could approach lacked sufficient firepower to cause effective damage. Rashly using black hole weapons would cause gravitational imbalance within the star system, and a series of chain reactions could lead to the destruction of the Morse solar system. The boarding party could only carry the demon weapons manufactured by Argent Noor. Custodes, Blaskowitz looked at Odysseus, a hint of helplessness in his tone. This is a last resort. Out of respect, I am telling you about the existence of these unclean weapons. Odysseus nodded. Indeed, as the Primarch said, he could have acted in secret, merely having the Custodes escort the Doom Slayers. The Primarch's current act of consultation showed the Custodes the utmost respect. After a moment of thought, the shield captain said to the Primarch, I support your plan, but upon returning to Terra, I will need to report this matter to the Emperor. Understood, Blaskowitz nodded. The Custodes' actions were beyond reproach, they had the right to reserve their opinions. I will go prepare. Odysseus drank his cold beverage, put on his helmet, picked up his halberd, and gathered the Custodes to prepare for the operation. Blaskowitz stood up and instructed the Custodes, go to the standard armory, there are some pieces of equipment you will find useful. Understood, Odysseus' eyes lit up, the armaments produced by Argent Noor were quite practical. Blaskowitz watched the Custodes leave, sighing helplessly. If the Legion had enough numbers to organize a sufficient force, he would not have needed to reveal these secrets to the Custodes. Secrets known by the Custodes would surely be known by the Emperor. The warriors in golden armor were the Emperor's most loyal servants, selflessly dedicating everything to the Emperor. Take me to the demon weapon chamber. The light of teleportation flared beneath Blaskowitz's feet, and his holy sigil vanished from the rest cabin. In a hidden corner of the Royal Majesty, this area was isolated from mortals, and its existence was known to few. The room existed in another dimension, and the passages leading to it were fraught with danger to prevent demons from escaping. Psyker runes from the old ones were inscribed on the door, blocking all Psyker detection. Outside the demon armory, 10 Doom Slayers stood in 2 rows, guarding the safety of the armory. Seeing the flickering transmission light, they immediately gripped their weapons, and after recognizing the arrivals, they knelt on one knee. Gene Father. Rise, Blaskowitz quickly waved for them to stand up. He had told them not to kneel before, but his Primarch's children insisted on doing so to show respect. King Noak, 10 Psyker masters in long robes bowed, welcoming King Noak's arrival. You've worked hard, Blaskowitz offered them his sincere greetings, expressing his respect. These selfless Psyker masters, with golden runes inscribed all over their bodies, used psychic barriers to defend against immaterial prying. Open the gate, I need to retrieve some weapons, Blaskowitz nodded, signaling for the masters to open the door. As you command, 2 Psyker masters turned, extended their rune-covered palms, and chanted spells to input psychic energy. A gap opened in the psychic shield, and the door immediately opened a crack. I think the Blood God is a 3-7 match against the Dark Prince. The Blood God can chop the Dark Prince 7 times in 3 minutes. No. 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 The Dark Prince would cry and beg the Blood God to spare it. So the question is, was the conflict between the Blood God and the Dark Prince orchestrated by the Lord of Change? Why all the fighting and killing? Wouldn't it be better for everyone to sit down and listen to the teachings of the merciful Father, to love each other? Blasphemous bloodthirster, the Dark Prince will pull out your blasphemous tongues and brutally violate your throats. This is the Godslayer's domain. Before the Dark Prince violates us, we might already be killed by him. Ha. 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 Gah. Inside the door, it was a chaotic mess, with the howls and taunts of demons occasionally echoing. When the door opened, the conversations and taunts inside the armory ceased abruptly. The demons seemed to have their throats choked. The Godslayer stood at the door, his gaze very unfriendly, looking at them as if they were corpses. 40 jars were displayed in the hall, each containing 10 demons of the 4 gods, imprisoned within runic seals. The sealed jars were only the height of a mortal. The massive bodies of the 4 gods' great demons were forcibly compressed and confined within a small space. At this moment, the Lord of Change folded its wings, shrinking its head like a startled bird, as docile as a quail. The bloodthirster knelt on one knee, expressing respect to the Godslayer, not daring to act presumptuously. The Keeper of Secrets' great demon trembled, its black-purple long tongue twisted together in its mouth, terrified of making a sound. The great unclean one slumped, the maggots on its body quivering, its sickly green body turning somewhat pale from fear. Blaskowitz's gaze was tangible, burning the demon's skin and emitting a scorching white smoke. The demons trembled in pain but dared not make a sound. No one dared to face the Godslayer's oppressive aura. Blaskowitz's heart longed to tear apart these vile creations, his fists clenched, suppressing the surging rage. The Godslayer's mark inscribed on the jar walls seemed to come alive, burning their impure bodies like a branding iron. 2 bloodthirsters, 2 great unclean ones. Blaskowitz was expressionless, his voice as cold as frost. Take them and rendezvous with the Custodes. He finished speaking and turned to leave, afraid he wouldn't be able to resist killing a few demons to vent his anger. Watching the Godslayer leave, the demons breathed a sigh of relief, a surge of elation welling up within them. If it weren't for the wrong location, they would even want to cheer aloud. As long as they were killed by these jars, releasing the concept and power of the demons, they could return to the warp and be reborn. From then on, the sky would be wide for birds to fly, and the sea vast for fish to leap, far from the Godslayer's threat, never wanting to see him again. 4 Doom Slayers walked into the hall. The bloodthirsters and great unclean ones cast hopeful glances, wishing to be chosen. Some great demons were even so agitated that they pointed at themselves. Behave. A Doom Slayer barked, instantly making the great demons stand at attention. In the eyes of the great demons, the departed Blaskowitz was the boss, and the Doom Slayers before them were the young masters. They could both turn them to dust, completely annihilating their very concept. Demons viewed invading reality as a game, a virtual game with real sensations, finding pleasure in trampling the beings of the real universe. The demons' greatest reliance was their ability to be reborn in the warp after death, so they acted recklessly, with no fear or reverence in their hearts. But the Godslayer was different. He possessed the concept of eradication, and his Primarch's children inherited that concept. To demons, Doom Slayers were the embodiment of true death. Once killed by them, there was no possibility of resurrection. Even their past and future, their true names and marks in the warp, would all be erased along with them. Even more terrifying, their demonic essence would be plundered, becoming the foundation for the Doom Slayer's strength. How could this not make the demons afraid? Seeing Blaskowitz was even more terrifying than seeing the 4 gods. If killed by an opposing deity, a demon's true name and warp mark would not disappear, only its form would be scattered by the deity. If the worshipped deity was pleased, the demon could be resurrected and return to receive divine grace once more. A low growl from a Doom Slayer made the demons quiet down again, waiting to be chosen like merchandise. Without any special selection, the Doom Slayers covered the demon jars at the front of the queue with psychic black cloths, obscuring them from outsiders' view. The chosen demons were overjoyed, casting contemptuous glances at the other demons, thrilled beyond measure. The Doom Slayers gripped the handles on top of the jars, lifted the sealed containers of the demons, and left the demon armory. As they left, the door closed again, and the great demons once more became boisterous, teasing and joking about the gods. Here, the gods' gazes couldn't reach, and they could speak freely, wantonly complaining about the 4 deities. In the Royal Majesty's hangar, 600 custodes were divided into 2 groups, ready for deployment. Metal wings were installed on the backs of the custodes, golden armor, flight packs designed for complex terrain. Originally intended for Doom Slayers, these packs were also used by the custodes for mission requirements, aligning with the Empire's interests. The Doom Slayers and custodes were similar in height, making their equipment highly compatible. Blaskowitz's eyes lit up when he saw them. The golden armored custodes with dark wings had a beautiful, fallen angel, aesthetic. Behind him followed 20 black armored Doom Slayers, escorting the forbidden weapons containing demons. Captain Odysseus, can you achieve maximum results and destroy the Xenos, gargantuan structures? Blaskowitz stood before the custodes, his tall figure looking down at the shield captain. It all depends on you. Odysseus held his halberd with one hand, his fist against his chest. The custodes will definitely complete the mission. Wear this, Blaskowitz gestured, signaling for the Iron Men to bring out the prepared equipment. What is this? Odysseus was puzzled by the rings in the technicians' hands. Precious teleportation lassos. A stone man held up the circular bracelets in his hand, explaining to the shield captain. They will take you off the Xenos ship and back to the transport ship if your lives are in danger or after the mission is completed. Blaskowitz's gaze swept over the custodes on the tarmac, and he slowly spoke. The Emperor entrusted you to me, and I must be responsible for your lives. Thank you for your concern. Odysseus' tone was sincere. He was truly grateful to the Primarch. This advanced equipment not only enhanced the custodes' combat power but also ensured the safety of every custodes' life. Odysseus sighed inwardly, feeling that the Primarch before him was more thoughtful compared to his brothers. Let's go. Blaskowitz signaled for the distribution of the teleportation lassos, ensuring basic protection for all custodes and Doom Slayers. Please rest assured, Primarch, we will surely return victorious. The shield captain raised his halberd, turned, and walked towards the transport ship. Custodes, board the ship. The Doom Slayers were also ready, donning their flight packs with the help of machines. Brothers, board the ship. We will seize victory for the Gene Father. Blaskowitz said nothing, clenching his fists as he watched his Primarch's children depart, speaking in their psychic link, "May you return safely." This boarding action was 1,000 times more dangerous than a normal boarding. The place the Custodes and Doom Slayers were going was an iron planet, teeming with terrifying Xenos. They had to penetrate 1/3 of the battle moon's depth, then detonate the demon weapons. Only the Custodes and Doom Slayers could resist the mental pollution emitted by the Xenos in the Xenos nest. The former were ultimate life forms created by the Emperor, the latter were his own Primarch's children. Their task was arduous. The progress of destroying the battle moon had to be synchronized, ensuring that the error in detonating the weapons did not exceed 1 minute in battle without communication. If the progress on both sides differed too much, the later battle moon might enter the warp and escape. The boarding party was divided into 2 groups, departing on 2 transport ships. They would enter reconnaissance ships, using the stealth capabilities of the warships to approach the Xenos battle moon, a process that could take several days. To avoid detection, the reconnaissance ships had to shut down their propulsion engines at a certain distance, allowing the vessels to drift forward in the void. Morse world. The Imperial Foss's irregular artillery harassment kept the Rangdan constantly on edge. The Xenos warriors still held onto hope, anticipating their fleet would tear through the human blockade and evacuate them from the battlefield. It was this faint spark of hope that prevented the Xenos Warmaster, Lolos, from having the courage to burn his bridges and fight a decisive battle against the human ground forces. Such hesitation is most taboo in war. Without the resolve to fight to the death, there was no strategy for retreat. The soldiers' morale and courage were worn down day by day, and the once sharp army lost its will to fight, becoming mere mortals desperate to survive. Within the Hive City, the humans' incessant harassment gradually drove the Rangdan elite to the brink of mental collapse. The Rangdan's highly developed nervous system and resilient mental strength inevitably began to decline and show fatigue. The Xenos' arrogance was shattered, their mental fluctuations filled with pleas, and when they looked up at the sky, they prayed that human shells would not fall. In war, attacking the heart is superior to attacking the city. Autumn continuously weakened the Rangdan's combat power through relentless mental torment, paving the way for subsequent operations. By the time the main army stormed the Hive City, they would find not fierce Rangdan, but a group of vulnerable Xenos awaiting slaughter. In the void, Blaskowitz personally took command, directing various battle groups to blockade the void front and resist the Rangdan's assaults. Though fleet battles lacked the bloody gore of close-quarters combat, their danger was even greater. In ground combat, the tide of battle might suddenly shift due to a burst of activity at a certain point, inspiring morale and changing the outcome. But in void fleet operations, such a situation was impossible. The steel ships were cold and indifferent, carrying the massive bodies of humans, and could not experience a sudden burst of activity due to minor variables. Or, it could be understood another way, the fleet commanders did not want any unstable variables within their fleets. Void ship combat was a precisely calculated gamble. Weapon range and power, maximum ship speed, shield overload thresholds, maneuver angles, and overload limits were all fixed factors. Within these fixed factors, they fought an unpredictable war. Blaskowitz sat steadily on his command throne, like a high-precision machine, constantly calculating the variables of the defensive line and coordinating the fleet's movements. Fleet casualties steadily rose, the cold, unforgiving universe tested every warship and every individual. Humans and Rangdan exchanged fire along the line he had drawn. Lances and plasma flickered incessantly, engines spewed plasma glow, intertwined, and the temperature of the surrounding void rose due to the engagement. The brutal war of attrition left the blockade line littered with shipwrecks, tangled together by gravitational pull. Yet the fighting never ceased. The wreckage of destroyed warships, accumulating space debris, became natural cover for other warships. Blaskowitz, with his extraordinary intellect, deduced the battle situation, skillfully maneuvering to lure the Rangdan fleet into a trap. He had to remain fully focused, destroying as many Rangdan ships as possible before the boarding parties arrived. Once the boarding operation succeeded, the Rangdan fleet would most likely retreat, or, less likely, fight to the death. Regardless of the outcome, Blaskowitz continuously secured tactical victories, ultimately achieving his strategic victory. In one corner of the holographic star map, a telescope constantly tracked a seemingly empty area. The stealth reconnaissance ships carrying the boarding fleet, after an initial acceleration burst, had shut down their main engines and were now drifting forward by inertia. Within the holographic display, a cold countdown indicated the remaining time until arrival at the destination. Blazkowicz glanced at the 72-hour arrival time, momentarily drawing his mind from the void battle to consider his next move. He now faced two choices. When the boarding party reached the designated location, Blazkowicz could choose to send a fleet forward to draw in more Rangdan ships, providing cover for their operation. But this could backfire. A sudden, abnormal move after a long war of attrition might instead raise the Rangdan's vigilance. Remaining still was safer, maintaining the current situation with few variables in the operation, but the risk to the boarding party would increase. Once the operation began, the Rangdan would inevitably conduct a grid search for warships, increasing the risk of exposure for the rendezvous ships. The rendezvous ships would be defenseless. Once discovered, they would be destroyed, and the boarding party would not be able to return. 10 ships will form a fist unit and advance, outflanking from the side of the defensive line to attack the enemy's flank. After 5 seconds of thought, Blazkowicz decided on a frontal assault, aiming to draw in the Rangdan fleet surrounding the battle moon. 600 custodians, 20 doom slayers. Such immense losses, not to mention the Emperor, even he himself could not bear. Notify Autumn that the Void Fleet is launching an attack. The Rangdan on the ground will surely react, and he must guard against their counterattack. Blazkowicz issued commands continuously. He not only had to direct the void battle but also consider the ground battlefield and the distant boarding action. These seemingly disparate battlefields were, in fact, interconnected, with one move affecting the whole. As the Primarch's orders were issued, the Void Fleet immediately sprang into action. The Abomination Exemplar Gloriana Queen warship detached from the defensive line, leading 10 Argent Noor ships in a flanking maneuver. Execute the Primarch's orders. Maximum speed, outflank and sweep the Xenos fleet. The Lord of the Void Sky Army roared, urging the ship's serfs to begin the flanking maneuver. The Lord of the Legion showed no hesitation. The will of a Primarch was not for mortals to fathom. Over nearly 10 days of fleet attrition, the Primarch's command ability had opened his eyes, making him understand the difference between a Primarch and an Astartes. Although they shared a genetic connection, they were entirely different species. Aside from the first day of fleet contact, when a slight awkwardness in his intellect led to the loss of several cruisers and frigates, his subsequent commands were swift and clear. He even specified precise ship locations and exact times for rotations. Over a week, under the Primarch's command, Imperial ship losses steadily decreased, while victories mounted. The mixed formation of Argent Noor ships and Imperial ships first had the Imperial ships absorb damage, fully leveraging the Argent Noor's superior firepower. Once the void shields were nearly depleted, the Argent Noor ships would then withstand enemy fire. By this point, the fleet would have closed with the enemy, allowing the Imperial ships to bring their full firepower to bear. Strike swiftly, then disengage immediately. Immediately switch ship positions, and as they disengaged, the Argent Noor ships would again unleash their power. As the coordination between the ships became more proficient, there were almost no battle losses in the later stages, only abundant victories. The cooperation between the Imperium and Argent Noor, at a very small cost, resulted in the destruction of nearly 100 Rangdan capital ships and countless smaller vessels. With this ship at the lead, adopt a spearhead formation. The Lord of the Legion continuously issued orders, adjusting the formation of the fist. Adeptus Mechanicus personnel deep within the ship, beside the Gloriana Queen warship's plasma reactor, chanted prayers to the Omniscia, awakening the ship's dormant power. The Abomination Exemplar led the charge, continuously accelerating, launching an attack from the side of the Rangdan ships. No need to slow down. Activate the bow's disintegration field and punch through. Broadside the enemy. The Lord of the Legion roared, as if imbued with the ship's fury. Evade! Evade! The Rangdan captain's mental fluctuations were violent, issuing urgent commands, ordering the ship's thralls to adjust the ship's posture. The human attack was too sudden, abandoning the war of attrition blockade to assault their flank. What was wrong with that warship? The Rangdan were now filled with 1,000 questions. As a primary human warship, the Abomination Exemplar was closely watched by the Rangdan. It had withdrawn from the defensive line, then reappeared on the defensive line, had it not. How did it suddenly appear on the flank? It naturally did not know that after the Abomination Exemplar withdrew, it had indeed immediately left the blockade line and begun a secret flanking maneuver. The warship anchored at the front line was a cruiser disguised as the Abomination Exemplar. The cruiser was equipped with numerous holographic projectors, and its ship signal was deliberately amplified to mimic the Abomination Exemplar's appearance. The disguise was crude, but in the chaos of battle, amidst heavy radiation interference, it naturally managed to deceive. This tactical arrangement was proposed by Gates. Its flash of inspiration, surprisingly, came from the Rangdan Xenos themselves and their powerful electromagnetic interference technology. In the early stages of the war, Blazkowicz himself was almost deceived by their disguised signals, mistakenly believing them to be friendly warships. Ultimately, it was Iron Man's precise calculations and his insistence that proved there could be no friendly forces in that part of the void. As the Rangdan panicked, the Abomination Exemplar plunged into the battle line, its bow flashing with disintegrating lightning, engines at full thrust, ramming into a Xenos battleship. Juices flew wildly. The biological warship's tissues vaporized in the disintegrating lightning, the crisp snap of its spine breaking mixed with the hiss of splashing goo. Semi-biological warships had obvious weaknesses, lacking heavy armor, they could not withstand impact. Target lock complete, the cogitator array announced, its mechanical voice alerting the captain to the optimal firing moment. Broadside cannons are in optimal firing arc. All ships fire. The Lord of the Void Sky Army was equally ruthless, allowing the Abomination Exemplar to unleash its full firepower. The Gloriana-class battleship, the Empire's most powerful warship, its might made the star sector tremble. Who could withstand her attack? None could resist. No Xenos warship could endure her wrath. The Abomination Exemplar maintained its speed, its broadside weapons simultaneously targeting 8 Xenos warships, the limit of its firing arc. Lances blazed like the sun, all torpedoes were launched, and macro cannons fired ceaselessly. With a hull over 20 kilometers long, not a single weapon remained silent, all unleashing their fury upon the Xenos warships. The shields of the 8 Rangdan warships instantly overloaded. The Abomination Exemplar brushed past them, speeding away at an incredible pace. The Rangdan fleet had no time to rejoice, the warship's Hedendrun attack signaled impending destruction. Before their shields could fully regenerate, the human silver-white warships surged forward, they were the true killing blow. These oddly styled Xenos warships, their own firepower led to their downfall. Lances lit up, macro cannons roared. The 8 shield-broken warships were torn apart by the onslaught, becoming new space hulks. Lord of the Legion, the deck alarm has been triggered, we have been boarded. The cogitator array reported again, its surface showing hundreds of thousands of bionic faces, rapidly relaying the warship's status. Deck 6 has been invaded. The cogitator, a fusion of machine and biological nerves, a creation of the Imperium after it abandoned artificial intelligence. The Adeptus Mechanicus had implanted human brain tissue into the computer as a logical processing unit. Notify the Legion warriors, the Lord of the Legion quickly thought, issuing an order to the cogitator. Surround the Rangdan from multiple directions, clear all thralls in the area, and prevent the spread of Xenos psychic contamination. Understood. The cogitator's bionic vocalizer responded, its tone mechanically cold, deploying space marines. The Lord of the Legion nodded, no longer focusing on the boarding incident, instead concentrating on the Abomination Exemplar's direction of advance. He needed to stir up a storm to lure the enemy deeper. He didn't know what the Primarch was planning, but it was certainly a major event concerning the war. On the ground battlefield, the Rangdan ground forces also made their move, with human slaves emerging from the Hive City. After a prolonged siege, most humans were listless, pale, and physically weak. The Hive City, having lost its main power source, struggled to produce enough resources to sustain the massive human auxiliary army. The Rangdan would not allocate supplies to maintain the lives of what they considered pigs and dogs. Grand Master, simply defend, the time for a full assault has not yet come. Autumn was in the command bunker, and Urian's figure appeared on the communication channel. Understood, Commander Autumn. A smile appeared on Urian's resolute face, he looked ruddy and invigorated. Having harassed the Xenos for several days, with the Nur Legion assisting in defense, Urian had been able to fully rest. The Grand Master's expression grew serious as he told Autumn, we will hold the defensive bases and will not rashly sally forth. Urian was willing to obey battlefield directives, he knew well who Autumn represented. The true overlord of the grand strategy was the Primarch in space, that great one was orchestrating the overall direction of the battlefield. Deep down, he was also willing to cooperate with Autumn, in gratitude for the Nur Legion's generous support. During the days of ground defense, Argent Nur had sent many supplies, rewarding the Imperial Army and Legion soldiers. Commence bombardment. After ending the communication, Urian ordered the artillery positions to begin striking the human thralls, extend the barrage, conduct a carpet bombing. First combat sequence, move to battle positions. Second combat sequence, prepare for relief, defend against the human tide's assault. The Grand Master was no longer stingy, the two defensive bases had been dismantled, all troops returned to the main base, and he now commanded a large force. As the bombardment began, the rested Imperial army once again plunged into battle. The Argent Noor line was long, forming a slightly curved sector, encircling one-fifth of the Hive city's outer perimeter. 250,000 mortal auxiliary army soldiers, 2.5 million automated combat servitors, and various heavy fire support. Everyone stood ready, preparing to defend against the Rangdan assault, facing the onslaught of a massive human thrall army. Commander, do we need to use artillery and titans? The Mortal Legion commander stood beside the command console, asking Autumn. Not yet, Autumn said, his gaze fixed on the human tide on the battlefield, not looking up. Our troops need training, to face any type of enemy. Those fallen brethren, perhaps they are the crucible for forging will, to let the warriors know the cruelty of the battlefield. Let their will be tempered by blood, to grow into true warriors. I understand. The Mortal Legion commander said nothing more, returning to his position. He sat back in his chair, a blue holographic projection before him, allowing him to command his legion at all times. Autumn's central command console overlooked the entire planet. Warships in space constantly scanned Morse world. All populations from all Hive cities poured out, converging here, painting the holographic image blood red. He did not call for orbital bombardment, he wanted to use this immense pressure to broaden the horizons of the Argent Noor Mortal Auxiliary Army. In the boundless Star Ocean, such battlefields were commonplace. Conquering the Star Ocean not only meant facing Xenos but also pulling the trigger on one's own kind. Autumn coldly swept his gaze over the blood-red mass of enemies, his eyes showing no emotion, issuing the commander's order, no use of servitors, engage the enemy with defensive lines. His command was not given directly to the soldiers but transmitted to the terminals of each legion commander. The Noor Legion had a strict hierarchy, never bypassing ranks. The overall commander was responsible for grand strategy, and legion commanders were responsible for executing strategic actions. Battalion and company commanders within the Legion were responsible for tactical execution and specific frontline responses. At the frontline defensive positions, junior officers relayed orders layer by layer, communications quickly reached the soldiers under their command. Disable auxiliary aiming systems, disable visual telescopes, disable. Clatter, the soldiers moved in unison, disabling automatic aiming on their weapons and various functions within their helmets. Soldiers. We now have no auxiliaries, simulating the most brutal battlefield, defending against the enemy's attack. A battalion commander, leading 1,000 men, patrolled the defensive line. The coarse voice unique to soldiers echoed in the battalion-level communication. We are several years behind our battle brothers. Hold the line, remember what we learned in the war college. The ground began to tremble, human slaves surged like a tidal wave, pressing against the Imperial and Argent Noor lines, a terrifying sight. For King Noak, the battalion commander roared hoarsely, his voice, unfiltered by the communication channel, reverberating across the defensive line. For King Noak, his war cry resonated, and all soldiers on the line shouted, their deep voices shattering the overcast sky. For the Emperor. In the Imperial line, a similar war cry responded. Facing an enemy far outnumbering them, they let out a fearless roar, knowing they would win. The Primarch was in space, the Emperor watched over Terra. I've never seen so many people, a sentinel soldier in the Argent Noor line remarked casually to his comrade beside him. His armor was not white, but the original gray of steel, with Blaskowitz's insignia inscribed on his shoulder pad. This sentinel soldier had experienced the Orc siege, participated in the War of Truth, and witnessed the rise of Blaskowitz Novik. To signify the sentinels' honor, Blaskowitz had granted them their original color, distinguishing them from later sentinels recruits. Aren't you nervous? The white-armored recruit asked, gripping his spear tightly, his fingertips trembling slightly from the battlefield's pressure. Nervous. What's that? The veteran scoffed disdainfully, placing a hand on the newcomer's shoulder. I've been in battlefields thousands of times more terrifying than this. What was it? The recruit asked curiously. He knew a part of Argent Noor's history had been deleted. I hope you never witness it in your life. The veteran shook his head, speaking solemnly and gravely to the newcomer. That is the deepest terror, only courage and will can overcome it. With that, the veteran said no more, raising his spear and patrolling the line with the recruit, protecting the mortal auxiliary army. Due to the shutdown of various auxiliary systems and the abandonment of ultralong-range firing capabilities, the Legion commanders decided to let the enemy enter within 500 meters before engaging. The Legion commanders were confident that the weapons in the Legion's hands could withstand the surging human tide. The Imperial line had already begun fighting, red laser beams forming a deadly blockade, engaging the human brethren before them. Having experienced the most critical moments, they naturally handled it with ease, without the slightest panic. Within the Argent Noor line, stray bullets occasionally whizzed by, the slave army's automatic weapons fired, shooting at the line. Bullets pinged off power armor, and stray rounds fell like rain, each one striking the new recruits' mental defenses. The Sentinel soldiers watched with interest, a smile on their faces beneath their helmets, observing how the mortals, who had undergone simplified guard training, controlled their inner fear. Hey! In this extremely tense moment, a veteran guard suddenly roared. The mortals' bodies trembled violently, the old veterans' shout jolting their taut nerves. Almost instinctively, the auxiliary army soldiers' fingers rested on their triggers, wanting to fire. Only at the last moment, the instinct from decades of training held them back, preventing them from shooting. The responsible company commander looked at the sentinels, cold sweat pouring down his body. He, too, was greatly startled. If his soldiers had fired, his responsibility would have been significant, potentially leading to retraining as the most severe consequence. Fortunately, the soldiers withstood the test from the sentinel's lord. Not bad. The sentinels nodded. The mortal soldiers before him had not disgraced their warrior training. Lord. The company commander spoke cautiously, the sweat on his body being wicked away by the power armor's internal circulation. What are you nervous about? The sentinels raised his hand, interrupting the mortal officer's speech. The old veteran shouted, what has nervousness brought you? It only clouds your reason, making you forget your usual training. Overly tense nerves will only stiffen your bodies. Relax a little. True strength comes from within. The enemies before you are but a gentle breeze. At his reprimand, the soldiers visibly relaxed. After a few deep breaths, their fingers moved away from their weapon triggers. We are an unyielding high wall. Remain calm and composed. A gentle breeze passes in an instant, but the high wall stands eternally. Compared to the enemies before you, you should focus more on the condition of your weapons, ensuring they can fire bullets at the critical moment. The sentinel's spear shaft tapped a soldier's shoulder. He asked in a low voice, can your weapon fire? The soldier's hand trembled. He glanced sideways and realized the safety on his weapon was not disengaged. Haha, the sentinel shook his head and walked away, fresh recruits. I don't know what they're so nervous about. Even with warrior training, differences between individuals still existed, and mortal soldiers could never fully grasp it. Although he shook his head, the sentinels inwardly approved of the mortal soldiers. Participating in a real battlefield for the first time, their posture remained unshaken, overcoming their inner fragility with the instinct of training. You. The company commander walked up and said to the soldier, if you survive, I expect to see your self-criticism. Understood. The soldier shouted loudly, trying to make as many people as possible hear him. He knew how serious his mistake was. He re-entered his firing position, raised his weapon, aimed at the enemy, and waited for the order to fire. Fire. Orders were given by various Legion commanders, transmitted from the command center to the battlefield. Fire. The frontline officers ordered to fire. There was no passionate roar, but the calm tone was beyond doubt. The soldiers pressed their triggers and immediately opened fire, using bullets to eliminate the enemies before them. These alien slaves, though thin and driven by withered muscles, ran with an undiminished fanaticism on their faces. There were no intense gunshots, only the sound of electromagnetic projectiles. In front of the Noor auxiliary army, enemy forces fell in swaths. The moment they fired and killed the enemy, the Noor auxiliary army realized how fragile the overwhelming tide of enemies before them was. Only then did they understand that on the battlefield, only the weapon in their hand was reliable. Inner tension and hesitation would ultimately shackle their courage. The initial gunfire was somewhat chaotic, but after only half a minute, the firing gradually stabilized and became rhythmic. The strength of an army could be judged by its shooting. Trained since childhood, the auxiliary army, having undergone the baptism of slaughter, gradually matured in their mindset towards the battlefield. Their inner turmoil gradually subsided, and their powerful professional skills were brought to bear at this moment. The electromagnetic nail guns in their hands accelerated steel nails to 2,000 meters per second, piercing through enemy bodies. No longer holding down the trigger to spray, they used the weapon's sights for aiming when the auxiliary aiming system was lost. The electromagnetic nail guns whirred, muzzles flashing with electricity, continuously firing 8mm steel nails, punching fist-sized holes in flesh and blood. Inexpensive electromagnetic weapons were best suited for the auxiliary army, excelling in both firepower and sustained capability. A standard magazine held 500 finger-length steel nails, greatly easing logistical management. The weapons were connected to the power armor's battery, and the nuclear power battery could last for decades. Reload. The auxiliary army, divided into smaller groups, cooperated closely to ensure continuous firepower output. In front of the Argent Noor line, there was now a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, all enemy remains and severed limbs. The Empire's laser guns cauterized wounds upon hitting biological targets, providing a certain hemostatic effect. This resulted in large piles of corpses accumulating in front of the Empire's lines, but without a large amount of flowing blood. Autumn, in the command center, nodded imperceptibly. The Genofather's efforts had not been in vain. According to the data, at the moment the auxiliary army opened fire, ammunition consumption was huge, but the kill-to-damage ratio was very low. After a minute of familiarization, this ratio increased and continued to improve. He stared at the command console, not paying much attention to the enemy's movements, but more concerned with the coordination of the mortal army. Notify the artillery to bombard this area with phosphorus ammunition. The Legion commander sat in his position, outlining an area on the overall map. Burn the enemy corpses to prevent the infantry's field of fire from being obstructed. Supply teams, keep up. Constantly monitor the troops' ammunition consumption to ensure the warriors have no worries about ammunition. Battle sequence replacement in 1 minute. Every person must kill an enemy and receive the baptism of the battlefield. The 25 Legion commanders each performed their duties, coordinating the operation of the battlefield. They were also transforming, shedding some of their panic and shortcomings, becoming more adept. Autumn no longer focused on trivial matters. As the Noor auxiliary army became proficient, he shifted his gaze to the overall situation. Scanned by orbital vessels, Morse world still had 600 million people, all controlled by the Rangdan. Originally about 1,400 million were eliminated by the First Legion. This population number was rapidly decreasing, with non-combat attrition being greater than those eliminated by humans. To wear down the landing forces, the Rangdan made everyone leave the hive cities and surround them on foot across the planet's wilderness. Autumn shook his head at the vast numbers. He knew the Rangdan's contamination ability was astonishing, but he hadn't expected it to be so powerful. According to intelligence provided by Grand Master Urian, the key to the Rangdan's control over the population lay in the water source. The aliens first controlled a small portion of people, then introduced their secreted brain fluid into the hive city's water supply, and soon they could control an entire hive city. Only a tiny amount of brain fluid was needed for the aliens to establish a psychic link, forcibly twisting human thoughts and making them loyal servants. This process was irreversible. Once controlled, it was eternal damnation. Now, with the changes in the void battlefield, the entire population of Morse world was moving to surround them. The alien Warmaster in the Hive City could no longer hold back and sought revenge against humanity, coordinating a synchronized attack with the Void Fleet. Autumn rested his chin on his hand, thinking carefully about how the aliens would attack the human lines. Land and air were unlikely. Without shields, elite warriors exposed to firepower were simply seeking death. Master of Mechanics. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he called out to the Argent Noor technical personnel. Lord, a middle-aged man in a black robe with an auxiliary arm backpack walked out of the command fortress. What are your orders? Autumn nodded and asked the Master of Mechanics, is the seismic monitor functioning normally? A mechanical arm extended in front of him, projecting an image before the Master of Mechanics. It's functioning normally, but with the battlefield artillery fire, there's too much noise. Autumn's expression was grave. The readings from the seismic monitor trembled violently, like a human heartbeat monitor. He looked at the Master of Mechanics and said with certainty, the aliens will attack from underground. I understand. The Master of Mechanics retracted his mechanical arm, bowed, and left to set up instruments for preventative measures. Autumn nodded. It was not too late to take precautions now, as the battle had not yet reached its climax. Currently, the Primarch was wearing down the Rangdan's Void Fleet, striving for maximum results. Eliminating the Rangdan's fleet before the boarding parties acted was the Genofather's objective. The Rangdan forces on the ground were meet on humanity's chopping block, to be dealt with entirely at humanity's will. If they were to abandon Morse's natural resources, orbital strikes and extermination orders would be enough to eliminate the alien infection. But they could not move. The Primarch needed elite warriors to draw out the Rangdan fleet. The current battlefield was a tug of war. Any rash move by either side would lead to complete defeat and prevent the maximization of results. Time continued to advance, and the chess game set by Blaskowitz gradually moved towards his predicted outcome. In the void, 2 scout warships, after a long period of skipping stones, finally rounded to the far side of the star, between the 2 battle moons.